grabando, as we used to say back in the Miami Planetarium. That's Spanish for recording. Hi, everybody. Bill Whittle, and a little bit of a bed hair, I guess, bedhead. It has been crazy, nutty, really wacky, wonderful, loony, amazing couple of days. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to tell you for the worst produced show on the internet, this may set a record. This one, actually, I have a feeling it might. And the reason I say that is because we are now operating really with two systems at the same time. I've got you can see the lights are getting brighter and weirder. The office is getting so close to being done that it's almost done. There's a lot of junk in the background, but we're still playing with two different computer setups, as you can see. So we are going to be in a little bit of an interesting place tonight as far as all the rest of this stuff goes. It's a wacky, nutty, crazy episode 82. I think this is. This will be the last of the famous Tough Liberal Questions edition. And your humble host, who last week was at the end of his nerves, just ready to smash things with a bat, is no longer in that position at all. But we are in a really, I don't know how to describe really where we are right now. We're in a place of transition that has almost turned the corner to being done. We've got, heck, I might as well just show you. I mean, this place was we still have that open riser over there, and that may not look like much has been done over there with the Cove, because frankly, almost everything that's been done on this show is in back of me. I've got a monitor here. I've got a 55-inch 4K monitor. I've got the new iMac machine. We've got all kinds of artwork coming. We've got... I can't describe it. I really can't describe it. I know it sounds a little scattered. That's probably because it is a little scattered, but the fact of the matter is we are, after 4 or 5 months, I guess, actually at a place where we're almost ready to get down to serious business. I just saw somebody in the comment section wanted the propeller hat thing going, so I did have that prepared this time. If I can just get it mounted in here someplace, somewhat semi-permanently, that would actually be pretty cool. I wish I thought of this earlier. There we go. Because, you know, if you're going to be dealing with questions that liberals ask and you want serious answers, you really have to have the propeller in the head in order to be able to be taken seriously. A couple people miss Angry Bill. I kind of miss Angry Bill too sometimes, got to tell you. There are times when Angry Bill is necessary. I was just out of my mind last week. There's just so much stuff to do. And I spent the last hour here trying to get the new computer to do the Ustream stuff. We've got new cameras that we're going to be using. Oh, no. Like I said, worst produced show on the internet. Even my propeller hat fell off. We've got cameras that we're going to be using to do Stratosphere Lounge 2.0. And I guess I'm just hoping that you're enjoying my confusion as much as I'm squirming here, because I really just had to race to get this thing up tonight. Ended up having to take the old computer from the back room, bring it in here, but we're transmitting and recording, and so we're going to get this thing finally done. We're going to get a mic stand. Yes, thank you for asking, Buck. We're going to get all kinds of things. Let me just tell you, in my completely scatterbrained lunatic running around with my hair on fire, or mussed up anyway, way, just a little bit about what's happening here. We have been working on this office, as you know. We've been here almost 3 months now. We didn't get really anything done for the first month or two. We then got the painting done, which looked good. And then we found a magical guy to do the actual installation, who I might add is a gigantic liberal. And we've had just the best possible time. When I told him about backlighting the stuff, he went nuts, and he saw the Cove lighting and everything, and he's just been terrific. I'm actually sitting on a 1-foot tall riser here, because mounting the TV on the wall the way we wanted it at the correct height meant that if I was sitting on the ground, I was looking up at it, which was kind of cool, but gets a little tiresome. The monitor, the 4K monitor, is it's not quite as sharp as a good display monitor. Not quite, almost, but I have the advantage of being able to spend the whole day working without using my glasses, because I need glasses to see things up close. But that monitor is so big and it's far enough away that I can actually look at it without glasses, which is nice. So that's cool. And this won't mean probably too much to any of you directly, although you certainly see the result. But we upgraded the computer, and it's a measure of how busy I've been. So that to say that this computer, which I've wanted for quite a long time, the new top of the line Mac Pro, we had it in a box for about, I don't know, 3 weeks before we even opened the box, and for me that's almost unheard of. But we finally got it hooked up, and we've had it hooked up, and I've been playing around with it a little bit. And then this last firewall, the one that I put up today, You're Not a Liberal, we did that on the new computer. And I just got to preface this so you know the degree of awesomeness that this actually meant for me. Usually when you get a tech upgrade, or you spend money on trying to get things faster, or your tech gear upgraded, costs a ton of money, and you expect really big things, and you're always disappointed. You get 40% of what you thought you might get, or you spend all this money on this hardware, or you get a new video card or something, and you find out, well, as it turns out, Premiere Pro doesn't use all 12 of the cores, it only uses 8, and you actually wouldn't really have needed to buy a new processor at all, blah, 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 blah. So that's what I was expecting. Now, we had a Mac Pro in there that we've done every single piece of work on since we started doing firewalls, when we started Declaration Entertainment. And it's in the next room now. Actually, it's in this room because I'm broadcasting through it because I couldn't get the new one hooked up. But in any event, just so you know, to render the 1080 movie for a 6-minute video took about an hour and 45 minutes. And usually, because I'm working so hard and get so much to do, that means that I finish the video anywhere around 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night, then I have to wait 2 hours for it to finish doing the movie output, and then I start the upload. So an hour 45 for a 6-minute video to render it at 1080p, render it and output it. And I got this new computer, and I just hooked it up, and I thought, man, if I could just get this under an hour, if I could knock it down from 145 to 59, that'd be awesome. And if I could cut the time in half, if I could get it down to 45, 50 minutes, I'd be over the moon happy. So last night I turned it on, and I got everything done on the new computer with the new monitor. And I hit the render button, and the new computer did what the old computer did in 1 hour and 45 minutes. The new computer did it in 6 minutes and 32 seconds. 1 hour and 45 minutes down to 6 minutes and 32 seconds. That is, without question, I've been in the computer game for a long time. That is the biggest, most gigantic, awesome, amazing increase in power and results that I've ever experienced in anything ever. And I'm very happy, very, very, very happy about that. So that's really good news. And as we slowly get all this stuff together, we'll get the rest of these things online and so on and so forth. So anyway, I just want to let you know we went from 1 hour 45 to 6.5 minutes. And that's a big deal. You can see behind us here we have a couple of things on the wall. Those are backlit with the white LEDs. There's a couple of Sid Mead pictures back there. I took a shot of one of them and put them on the Facebook page. We've got the wall I'm facing now has got 6 of the 6 Meads up. So we've got 6, 7, 10 on the walls right now. And then there is an amazing, very generous offer made by one of you wonderful people who, we've got the Stratosphere Lounge banner that's going to be there. The full-size Astro Girl is going to go on the front door. She's almost ready. But we'll make all these announcements and do all the credits downstream another episode or two. But I just want you to know that I had an offer from somebody to do like wall-size prints. So just so you know what's coming, I've got a on the wall over there. There, just next to the other, that's a 1080 monitor over there. That whole white wall is going to have a banner that's 12 feet across. It's 12 feet with the Stratosphere Lounge, and it's going to look exactly like the Stratosphere Lounge. We're going to be shooting from that riser from that on. But right there in that gray area, we've got a life-size picture of Captain Kirk standing next to the bridge chair. On this other wall over here, right there in that gray corner, all this is going to be cut out and backlit. I've got a picture of Captain Kirk in what I think is the best moment in the history of Star Trek. Let me rephrase that. It's my favorite moment. It may not be the best moment, but it's certainly my favorite moment. There's a picture of Kirk that I got, and he's looking over his shoulder at something that's coming towards him, and he's got yellow powder on his hand, and he is making the cannon out of bamboo that he's going to use to shoot the Gorn commander. So on that wall is going to be a life-size Kirk looking over his shoulder with the big yellow sulfur in his hand as he prepares the giant bamboo cannon. And then on that wall back there is a life-size Gorn coming up with his obsidian blade. And that's pretty kick-ass. I'm going to have a Buckaroo Banzai wall, and then the orange wall back there. This should be up hopefully, well, if not next time, then the time after that. You won't be able to see it when we do the show from the banner, but that whole back wall there, the whole orange wall back there is going to be 2001: A Space Odyssey. I've got a picture of Dave Bowman in a helmet with a couple of screenshots from, the stuff that changed my life. That docking sequence with the Ares, docking with the space station up there is just fantastic. And we've got a couple Buckaroo Banzai, I think. So anyway, everything is looking good, and after 3 months of working and sweating and trying to get this thing into shape, it's actually slowly coming online here. So before we get to your questions, I'll just tell you what's coming up, and then we'll finish this part 4 of Tough Liberal Questions. One other thing, by the way, I tried to upload last week's episode, and all of a sudden Ustream told me that I don't have the ability to upload it to YouTube because I've only got a 15-minute limit on YouTube. For the first time ever, I heard this, so I don't know what the heck's going on. It may be, I don't know. We'll download it, then upload it. We'll get it all sorted out. But just a quick heads up, we're going to get you more details next week. But on the 20th of October, that'll be our 1-year anniversary. And we are racing, and I mean I'm here every night till midnight and weekends too, because I got a lot of coal to shovel. I've got these firewalls every week, and I've got afterburners and, shooting all these extra segments of PJTV and so on. But we're working like crazy to get the members-only content up so that we can do kind of version 2.0 on October 20th. On the 1-year anniversary, we'll have the Time Over Target show up, hopefully. We will have it up. We'll have Bill Me, and we are making arrangements to get the space for the first of the speakeasies. So as soon as we know where we're going to hold that, for sure, we had a fantastic facility, but it got booked for months. As soon as we know where that's going to be, we will send out an invitation, and you guys can come on down and hang out with me and whoever our first guests are. Probably be Dwight Schultz and maybe Andrew Clavin and Zoe or Jeremy or somebody like that, and we'll just have some fun, and we'll have a laugh and we'll have a blast. So 2.0 is coming up. I told you there's a big announcement to come up. I'm going to save that for the opening of Stratosphere Lounge 2.0, which, again, we're trying to have in place by October 20th. It looks like the room will be ready anyway. And Stratosphere Lounge 2.0 will be shot over there with the riser and the banner. And we should have a couple cameras, and I'll get all that other stuff hooked up, so that'll be neat. And when we do make that first 2.0 show, we're going to postpone this announcement that I'm going to make a little bit later. But suffice it to say, a number of people out there, led by one guy, Strata Loungers all, have done an incredible amount of work. I mean, an incredible amount of work for me, and it's just for all of us, I guess. And it's just been breathtaking, and I'm blown away and very, very grateful. And I didn't want to mungle up the thanks for that. I've got enough of a showman in me to know you want to open everything up at the same time with new look, new everything, and we'll get that going. But anyway, so that's coming too. So I'm sure everybody wants to get this thing done because I want to get it done. This is the only time we've done a 4-parter. I think we might have done one 3-parter before, but this is our 4-parter on Tough Liberal Questions, and it's been an incredible 4-parter. Even last week when I was on my last nerve and roaming around the office with a baseball bat looking for things to smash that I could afford to replace, even then it turned into, I just think, really good stuff. So we will get it done tonight. We got another, see, it looks like about 12 to go, something like that. And of course, as I say, we're not making as much forward progress as we would like, just because we're having to run so fast to tread water, just to stay in position. These once-a-week firewalls are great, and I'm very, very proud of them. They are incredibly labor-intensive in terms of post-production. They take a day or two, and it's a lot of writing, and it's a lot of work, and I had not expected those when we first started talking about getting all this 2.0 stuff up, but you just have to work harder. And now's the time, by the way. We always open with some kind of personal reflections and stuff. I'll sleep when I'm dead, Alyssa. It's very, very clear to me. It's been clear to me probably for a month or two or three at the most, 3 months or so, as we got closer and closer to where we want to get to this thing, because we want to open this 2.0 website and get the new members-only content up so that we can move into the movie business. The movies are my my midterm goals. So my short-term goals were get enough members-only content up there for year 2 so that those of you who are members who basically just taken it on the chin and been incredibly supportive in exchange for your bumper sticker and your mug or your fleece or whatever, and get you something, of some value, some members-only content. So those are the short-term goals. Get the short-term goals done, members-only content up, run the membership up as much as we can. But starting on October 21st, which is the day after we get this stuff going, then we start fully developing the movies, 1 movie a year. Big Bet Problems in the winter, Common Sense Resistance the winter after that, and Aurora the winter after that. And then the long-term goals are things like a Free Frontier, real space program out in the real world, and an actual movie studio empire located someplace that doesn't suck, like maybe Coeur d'Alene, Iowa, or Idaho rather, or Lake Tahoe, or someplace that's maybe not here. In any event, it occurred to me that I was working about as hard as I thought I could work to keep doing what I'm doing, which is the political content, and keep shoveling that coal into the furnace. And as the approaching deadline for all this new members-only content stuff, October 20th, gets closer and closer, I realize I have to work harder and harder and harder because I got to get over those reefs. There's probably some relaxation on the other side, but there's nothing on this side. So it's been really for several months. It was just really stressful and and just tough and trying to find the time and being real frustrated at how long things were taking. But really for the last 2 or 3 weeks at least, and maybe longer, maybe the last month or two, I've gotten to a place of absolute calm and actually even kind of joy lately. I've cleared the decks. I have no social life. I don't do anything. I just come in here and work and try to get over these reefs. And it's very liberating in a way. It's very, very liberating to realize that this is showtime. It's like this is what I've been working for my entire life. Get to this point, get to these movies, start getting these movies done. And there is no way to back off and kind of go around. You just have to do more. You just have to put in more power. They just need, Scotty just needs, I need more, I need Warp 8, I need Warp 9. So, like I said, lately, there's just been a kind of a real relaxation mentally and a kind of a peace about it. It's like, I'm going to be working till midnight every night, 7 days a week for the foreseeable future. But the reason is to get to the place that I've been working to get to my entire life. That's a very, very, very good feeling, believe it or not. Very good feeling. And it's all thanks to you and your support. So let's toss out some red meat here and see what we can find for these final questions, because they are great questions, and I might actually put together. We have to do some new video content for year 2 members, and I'm actually thinking I might turn these answers into a video, not boil them down from this. The production quality is not high enough, but I've got a very strong feeling that I'm going to take the best answers here and use them as kind of kernels to produce a video of maybe 12 or 15 of these questions. Go back, look at what we said, boil it down, and then produce that. So that'd be your handy dandy, deployable. Oh, well, you want to talk about this? Here's your answer. So that'd be fun. In any event, there we go. The last thing I'll say before we go on after 28 minutes of just sort of random rambling is simply this. It's starting to feel like Disneyland in here. This last weekend was the first weekend it felt like a studio and not like an office. And that's really, really important. And I have worked my butt off and spent a ton of money getting this place the way I want it, getting the gear I want. I felt a little bad about buying this stuff until I realized, workmen spend money on their tools, and people who are professionals buy the best tools they can afford because they make their lives easier and increase the quality of their work. And that's basically what we're doing. But as Dave Big Boutte says, you cannot change the laws of physics. There's only 24 hours in a day. I don't know when they took out 10. It seems like they're 9-hour days now. That's generally how it feels. And don't worry, guys, I won't kill myself from overwork. I'll get it done. Anyway, let's get going. So here's what we got left, I think. Dave Deering says, why do you have a problem with raising taxes on the rich? I'll start by answering that question. I have a problem with raising taxes on everybody. Shouldn't they pay their fair share? Absolutely they should. One of the top leftist questions I get from those who don't understand how marginal rates, effective rates, and crony tax deductions credits work, and so on. So there's a bunch of answers to this. Number one, this idea that the rich don't pay their fair share is true. They don't pay their fair share. They pay far more than their fair share. I had the numbers in one of these videos not too long ago. Might be in taxation on the Virtual Presidency series, but the fact is the top 1% pays something like 26% of all income taxes. The top 5% pay, 50%? It's just shocking. It's absolutely shocking how much of the income tax the richest 2% or 5% pays. It's really amazing how much they actually pay. So the whole thing's a giant lie. It's a gigantic lie. The poorest 50% of the country doesn't pay any income tax at all, and they get the most benefits. They get all the, they get the health care and the welfare and the, they get all the benefits, and the bottom half of the country is not paying anything. So yes, it's completely unfair. It's completely unfair towards favoring people who don't pay anything. 50% of the country doesn't pay any income tax. They get most of the social benefits. The top 1% pays 26% of the total income taxes, and the top 5% pays 40, 50%, something like that. How's that fair? So it's a lie. They're already paying more than their fair share. They need to be reduced, number one. Number two, if you reduce the taxes on the rich will spend more money. And getting more money into the market, into the economy, is better than paying people taxation. If for no other reason, if you can make this, even liberals can understand this, progressives, I should say, leftists. If a rich person has $1 extra and he spends that dollar on your paycheck, that's $1 that you get from him because he's employing you. If, on the other hand, the government takes that dollar through taxation, then the dollar goes to Washington, where it wanders around for a while and hangs out in alleys and meets seemly and unsightly people and contracts various forms of communicable diseases, and slowly over the course of time, 30%, 20% dribbles back out of Washington to the person who might have gotten it anyway. It's better to just get employed by somebody than it is to have them tax that money, take it away, deduct the cost of the government, all the corruption, all the loss, all the favoritism, all the cronyism, all of the fraud and the waste and everything else, and then disperse it back out to people. So it's better for low-income people to have rich people taxed less, because if you want their money, you get their money more directly by having them pay you. Of course, that's the problem, is if they pay you, you have to work, and that's where the system breaks down as far as many people are concerned. It's the working for the money part that they don't particularly like. But now you're at the root of the issue, aren't you? So there's that. The main problem I have, obviously, we talked about it in an earlier part of this show, is that a progressive income tax, a tax that gets the rate increases as the income increases, is unfair on a completely obvious, straightforward basis. It's unfair and it's ridiculous. It's unfair and ridiculous because it says, first of all, that if you make, let's say the bracket changes at $250,000. So if you make $249,000 a year, $249,999 a year, then you're taxed at one rate. But if you make another dollar, suddenly it goes up by 12 percentage points or something, and now you're suddenly a bad guy as well. You're evil on top of it. You're a one percenter. You're rich. You're greedy. You're a fat cat. You're taking more than your fair share. It's nonsense. It's ridiculous. It's silly, and it's stupid, and it's evil, and it's wrong. And when you have a situation where by making more money, you don't just pay more tax, like if you're paying a flat 15% on everything, the more you make, the more you keep. But if you get to a point where you're making, let's say you're paying 20% in income, I'm just inventing the numbers, let's say you're paying 20% in income tax at $250,000 below, and you make $250,001, and now you go from paying 20% to 35%, let's just say. What does that tell you? What does that incentivize? It incentivizes you to do less. And there you have the miracle of socialism, where everybody does as little as possible and everybody has an equal share of the misery. Everybody has the worst housing. Everybody has less. If you are building incentives into a system for people to stop making money, then that hurts everybody, especially poor people who most need the economic opportunity. So there's that aspect about the rich not paying their fair share. There is a moral argument to be made, and it's the argument to be made because it's the ultimate argument to be made. You're not a better person or a worse person than I am because you make more money than I do. If you make more money than me, that doesn't make you a bad person. And if you make less money than me, or if you're stone cold poor, that doesn't make you a good person. If you listen to these progressives, Barack Obama and all of these people, they're always talking about the poor, the poor, the poor, the poor, the poor, the poor, the poor. And people think, oh, you heartless rich conservative. Well, I'm not going to get back into this again. I spent the middle 2 decades of my life stone cold poor. I didn't have 4 figures in the bank account consistently until 2009. 4 figures. I remember the first time I would check my bank account and would routinely see, 4 figures. That was 2009, 2010, something like that. So, having been poor and starting to come out of this state of being, and having known many millionaires who did not inherit their money, but who earned it, who literally started a dry cleaning business or geochronology business. There is no moral advantage to being poor. You're not a better person if you're poor. When you get down to the crime statistics, in many cases, you're a worse person. So this idea that all of this social engineering has to be done to benefit the poor, when poor people in America have cell phones, air conditioning, electricity, TVs, big ones, you really get to the heart of where this whole argument is. And that argument is it's not about the money and it's not about the poor. It's about the power of the people who have the ability to take the money. That's where it goes down to. And then I think probably finally, I think the thing I will say is that the whole idea of raising taxes is a bad idea, because the more you raise taxes, the more money you produce for the government, the more money the government gets its hands on, the more the government grows. The government is, Jeremy Boring pointed this out, folks, the government of the United States costs more than the GDP of the second biggest economy in the world. In other words, the U.S. government is about $4 trillion. China's GDP is about $4 trillion. In other words, it takes every single dollar that this gigantic communist country of 1 billion people produces to run the government of supposedly the freest people in the world. It's too expensive, and the reason it's too expensive is because it has all the money it wants. The reason you do not want to raise taxes is because the government will continue to grow until it runs out of money. And so the question becomes, how much money do you really need? And as I think I said in last week's episode, the answer to that question is consult your Constitution, figure out what the enumerated powers are, what does the federal government have the constitutional power to do, and what is the smallest amount of money that can be spent in order to accomplish those goals, period. So, there you go. It's not helping the poor. It's helping the people who are poormongers and who do more damage to poor people, by the way, these progressives, than any conservative robber baron ever did, because these poverty mongers convince people that they're powerless and that their fate is out of their hands. They convince them that they're being put down and kept down intentionally by a cabal and a conspiracy that doesn't exist in order to keep them dependent on guys like Jesse Jackson and on Barack Obama and Nancy Pelosi and all the rest of these people. They're taking their individual human destinies away through propaganda and converting it into political power for themselves. So, to hell with those miserable low-life bastards. They're evil, evil people. Chris Abate says, or Abate, I'm going to go with Abate. Chris Abate says, how can you be opposed to social justice? Don't you want people to be equal? Well, those are two different questions. First of all, I'm opposed to social justice because social justice does not exist. There's no such thing as social justice. The definition of what social justice is today is personal injustice. So, social justice today is the idea that because black people were held as slaves in America 150, 170 years ago, people's great-great-great-great-great-great-grandparents were slaves. Therefore, they should get opportunities that have to go someplace, slots, quotas. And so what they're basically doing is they're saying that modern white guys, white kids, for example, can't get into a school on a quota system because that slot is set aside for a black kid because that black kid's great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather was a slave. That's social justice. It's not justice. It's injustice. It's if that is taking away from the person who's working the hardest in the present day, then it's injustice. There's no such thing as social justice. Social justice is social engineering. Social justice is political power. I'm a passionate and deep believer in individual justice. So I don't believe in things like hate crimes. If they beat up some guy, let's say, and dragged him behind a truck because he was gay, and he died, that's first-degree murder. It's nothing more than that, and it's nothing less than that. It's first-degree murder. If somebody is denied their job, a job opportunity because of racial prejudice, well, there are legal remedies for that. There's only individual justice, because once you start saying that a class of people has been harmed and that class of people has to be, compensated by taking it out on another class of people, then you're not talking about individual guilt or innocence. You're talking about guilt by association over generations and so on. Every time people ask me about social justice and things like reparations for slavery, my question is, if you think reparations for slavery is okay, then at what point can Jewish Americans expect their payment from black Americans whose ancestors held them in slavery in Egypt for 400 or 500 years? Longer than blacks were held as slaves in America. At what point can we expect black Americans to start writing checks to American Jews to compensate them for the years of slavery that the Jewish people were held in bondage during the time of the pharaohs in Egypt? Well, that's ridiculous. How is it ridiculous? How is it more ridiculous than the slavery issue for reparations? We're not talking about these are people's parents or grandparents or themselves. We're talking about great-great-great-great-great-grandparents. It's a lie, and it's part of the giant progressive activity of using moral fig leaves to gain power and money. This is the whole argument, guys. I don't have to go any further than this. You have to understand it's really pretty simple when you get down to brass tacks. It's pretty simple. There are two kinds of people in the world, believe it or not. Those who divide the world into two kinds and those who don't. Now, seriously, if you want to talk about things like social justice, taxation, all the rest, you come down to two different attitudes. One is wealth is limited. I don't want to work. The best way for me to get ahead in the world is to redistribute other people's money to me using a legislative power to take money from people who've made money and give it to me. And in order for me to get the money, I have to have a reason to justify this power grab. And the reason and the power, in fact, the power base, will be I'm doing it for poor people. It's a lie. Barack Obama says you've made enough money, you shouldn't have a corporate jet. He rides around in a 747 in limousines everywhere he goes. It's power and money. So the two kinds of people in the world are people who want to work hard for a living and keep what they make with the understanding that certain government functions are important, limited, reasonable, and we're happy to pay for those. Versus the wealth redistribution people who are lazy, stupid, and venal, and have only one way to get luxury in the world because they're not willing to work. It's not that they can't. It's that they won't. And so I will take that rich guy's money and give it to me, and I'll say I'm doing it for poor people, but really what I'm doing is two things. I'm getting his money and his benefits, so I get to travel around in a limousine, and I get the moral benefit of going out and handing out dimes for the dollars that I collected, and everybody worships the ground that I walk on. I'm talking to you, Jesse Jackson, and Al Sharpton, and the rest of you frauds, who basically tell enormous sections of this population that they're kept down, downtrodden, disadvantaged, taken advantage of, systematically oppressed, when none of this is true. And they then take wealth from people who've earned their wealth, keep a lot of it, if not most of it, distribute dimes on the dollars to these people, and get to be a hero on top of it. It's a criminal racket. It's a criminal racket, is what it is. So there you go. So I don't believe in social justice. Does that mean I don't believe in justice? On the contrary, if somebody has been harmed, that person needs to be made whole, period. What's so hard to understand about this? If anybody can show me a case, look, if a woman can prove that she's worked the same hours in the same job as a man and she's getting less money than he is, she should sue that company and get compensated for it. And she would, except it doesn't happen. And it doesn't happen because it doesn't happen, because it's against the law. So there you go. So I'm not opposed to individual justice. I think social justice is a fig leaf designed to circumvent actual individual justice. Second part of the question is, don't you want people to be equal? I want people to be equal in a very extremely limited sense. I want people to be equal under the law. And that's all I want them to be equal under. And if you think about this, you're talking about handy answers for liberals. When the equality issue comes right up, just ask them this. When they say, don't you think people should be equal? Well, you say, do you think they should be equal height? What are you talking about? Are you saying you think that everybody should be of equal height? No. Well, then, if some people are taller than others, some people are going to have self-esteem issues, and some people are going to be better basketball players than others. Some people will be better jockeys than others. How can you say you want people to be equal when you don't want them to be equal height? Do you want them to be of equal intelligence? How are you going to enforce that? You know, you can make people of equal intelligence, but you can't make somebody who's got an 80 IQ into somebody who's got 180 IQ. All you can do is take somebody who's got 180 IQ and reduce their abilities down to a person who's got an 80 IQ. So when you say you want people to be equal, do you want them to be equally tall? Do you want them to be equally smart? Should they be able to run equally fast? If the answer is no to all of these things, then you have to ask yourself, what are you trying to say? You're admitting that people are not equal. And they're not equal in every single way. There are no two of us that are exactly equal. So if they're unequal in height, if they're unequal in IQ, if they're unequal in skin color, if they're unequal in speed, in strength, if you have 100 people in a room and you set them off running, one of them is going to cross a line first, and then one of them is going to cross the line last. And there you go. So if they're not equal, then what is it you're trying to say? What you want is you want them to all make the same amount of money, because that somehow presumably makes you feel good and presumably seems fair. But what it really means is, if you want, here's a quick rule of thumb for you folks. If you run into somebody who says everybody should make the same amount of money, that person is below the median income. I guarantee it. And that's all you need to know. In other words, I think we should all make the same amount of money because that would be a raise for me. So when they talk about being equal, what are they really talking about? So how come somebody has 9 houses and somebody only has 1 house or no houses? Well, there's a lot of reasons for that. Some of it's the luck of the draw. Some of people are born into rich families. But most of it is work. Most of it is hard work. Most of it is work, effort, and dedication. And it is absolutely true to say that there are millions of people who don't have the ability to do these things, but not because of their biological shortcomings or because of their intellectual shortcomings. It's because of their attitudes. It's been drummed into their heads that work is useless to them. No, it's not fair. What's fair is equality under the law. And equality under the law is a certain limited kind of equality that I am 100% in favor of. Equality under the law says that you don't get to go to the front of the line at an ATM because you have more money than somebody else. Equality under the laws. Now, if the bank wants to charge an extra $50 a month and give you a special entrance and special customers, that's a financial transaction. But equality under the law means that rich people don't get a better justice than poor people do in terms of the law. Equality under the law basically means that there's no such thing as the divine right of kings, and there's no such thing as the the Duke's right of senior, the first, the guy who was the Duke could have the first night with anybody who got married. Any peasant married some beautiful peasant girl, he had the right to sleep with her first. That kind of thing. Equality under the law means that any two individual citizens of the United States have to be treated equally and without benefit. That's the kind of equality I believe in. And after that, you need to be left alone to run as fast or as slow as you want to. It's up to you. I talk a lot about hard work and success and rewards, but I'm just as fine with you just sitting around and doing nothing. That's entirely fine with me. I don't care. It's really your business. It's your life. I wouldn't promote this level of work that I'm doing for everybody. It's not for everybody, and I wouldn't want to make everybody do it because I don't have that defective gene that has to tell other people what to do. Right now I'm working like an animal. I'm working really hard because I want to get ahead, and I am getting ahead. And if you don't want to do that, and if you want to just at the end of the day go home at 5 o'clock, punch out, sit back and watch TV, or go to football games, or relax and barbecue and do all that's your business. Congratulations. That's grand. That's why everybody should get to make their own choices. But I don't want people to be equal because they're not. And the only way you can make people equal is to use force. And when you use force, millions of people die. So the fact that people aren't the same height, the same speed, the same strength says that people are not equal. They're not. You cannot make them equal. You can only treat them as equal for legal protection purposes, and that allows everyone to start from the same starting line. Equality of opportunity means that everybody has the same starting line. Of this kind of equality, I'm 100% in favor. No one gets to start 20 yards ahead. No one is held back. Everybody gets the same starting line. Off goes the pistol. Run as fast or as far as you want to. Congratulations. Reap or do not reap the appropriate rewards. That's up to you. It's your life. Choose for yourself. Be happy. But equality of opportunity says that everybody has to cross the finish line at the same time with the same amount of money, same number of houses, same number of cars, same number of everything. That can only be achieved by slowing down everybody who's not the fastest person. And the way you do that is through murder and corruption. It's a fig leaf for people who are lazy. So there you go. Kevin Agorastos says, how do you respond to you're a neocon warmonger? Thank you very much. Anything else you want to add? This neocon word is something I've never understood. I mean, it's neocon. I understand the case for isolationism. I do. And I certainly understand the idea that it's not our obligation to go into the world and try to make it into America. I get that too. I think I got this as right as I'm ever going to get it on the virtual presidency thing on foreign policy, and it's basically the way I feel about warmongering. Is this: the United States has vital national interests in the world. And what are those vital national interests? Well, they're to protect the national interests of the United States. What's the national interest of the United States? Freedom. Period. Full stop. That's it. Freedom. That's what we're about. That's what we want, to be left alone to choose our own lives for ourselves. We want to be individual people. It's never been done before. It's been a big success. So what does that mean in terms of foreign policy and warmongering and neocon and, all this other stuff? It means pretty simply this. What do we have to do to protect our freedom? Not other people's freedoms, our freedom. Now, sometimes it turns out that by helping other people with their freedom is the best way to maintain our own freedom. I believe this conclusively from history. Sometimes the best thing to do is just to walk away. But the days of foreign powers threatening us with fleets of battleships and giant air armadas are over. Those days are over. We don't have that kind of warning anymore. We're well prepared for that kind of threat. The kind of threats we're facing now with nuclear terrorism, bioterrorism, and so on requires different sets of protocols to defend our freedom. Now, what that means to me is, first of all, an understanding that people in the world are different. It's not that the people in ISIS or Al-Qaeda are California liberals who we just have a misunderstanding with because we went in there and knocked their territory around. What we have to understand is they have an agenda, and their agenda is opposed to ours. I don't care what they do over there, frankly. They can live amongst themselves and kill each other. It's revolting and repulsive. That's their choice. I don't care. But comes a point where what they start doing starts to mess around with my Saturday afternoons, and at that point I have an interest in the outcome of this game. So my criteria for warmongering overseas is pretty simple. Is the United States national vital interest of the United States involved? If the answer is yes, then we need to be over there, because I'd rather fight them over there than over here. If the answer is no, then we don't need to be there. And so the question then becomes, is this conflict going to impinge upon our ability to watch the Gators on Saturday back home? If the answer is no, then it's not our problem. If the answer is yes, then it is our problem. And if the answer is yes, then the problem becomes, okay, what do we do about it? And the answer to what we do about it is we have to find, is there somebody in this fight who's fighting for freedom? If the answer is yes, we should support them. If the answer is no, then we should just hurt them. I have no problem with hurting them. You know, we have lost the ability to philosophically defend this civilization. We no longer believe in our own civilization. Well, the progressives don't anyway. I'm perfectly happy to leave people alone. But when they want to start doing things that are going to mess around with this freedom thing, then we need to go out there and mercilessly kill those people. If their goal is to destroy what we have here and to destroy this precious idea of individuality and the ability to do what you want and say what you want, those people can do whatever they want to out there. But they're coming after us. If they're starting to make plans to mess up our freedom, then we have to be prepared to go over there and kick their asses. So that makes me a neocon warmonger. The question then is, in a flexible, fluid world where everything's changing, where do we engage and where do we not, and how? And these are intelligent questions, and there's a great deal of disagreement about this, and this is where wisdom is derived. It's a great discussion to have about things like that. Where do we go? Why do we go? How do we go? If we go. But I'm not afraid to fight for what we believe in here. And when I say me, just so we're crystal clear about this, keyboard warrior chicken hawk thing. I spent 12 years preparing to fly fighter jets for the United States Air Force. I mean, that was my entire life. That is a high-risk occupation. It is a riskier business than being an infantryman in terms of the numbers involved versus the numbers of casualties. And I was prepared to do that for 12 years, and I wanted to, and I couldn't. And then I tried to re-enlist in my late 30s. I wanted to fly helicopters for the Army. And I was too old for that, and after 9/11, I went down and tried to re-enlist again. So I'm prepared to go, and it's not just talk for me. And when I talk to the people who sign up for the military, the actual guys on the point of the spear, the actual warriors, I find that their attitude is very interesting. The attitude of the warriors is not, I'm a poor disadvantaged kid who's just trying to make a living. Please don't send me out there to fight in your war for oil. The people who are the war fighters, the actual combat troops, have a very clear, at least in my experiences, universally clear understanding of what they're doing, why they're doing it, and I am on the exact same page as those people. If it's important to the country, we'll go. If it's not important to the country, we shouldn't go. And I just I think the world of them. You're going to see an afterburner. I think it comes out tomorrow, where I talk about a Wounded Warriors function I did, and that goes into, it's called Playing the Hand, and it goes into the idea of in America you're not forced to die with the cards that you're dealt. You can get dealt a crummy hand and you can improve it. And likewise, you can be dealt a lovely hand and you can screw it up. Here in America, there's a little bit of versatility. You got a little viscosity. You can move up and down here. So, I talk to these guys, and I understand what they go through, understand their sacrifice, and I'm prepared to do it too. And that's why I'm armed. So there you go. I'm a warmonger because I find that preparation for war is the best defense to keep the peace. And this, I guess I probably should have just started with this and leave it there. There is, throughout history, I don't think there's a clearer lesson in history. Those societies that are prepared to fight are the ones that maintain their status, and those that are not prepared to fight are the ones that lose their status. So if you like the general American status, which is, gay rights parades and feminism and all this stuff, if you're in favor of all that stuff, you better be prepared to fight for it. And you can have your gay rights parade and you can have your feminist studies, but leave the people who are prepared to fight for you alone. And don't try to defang them to make your cocktail party morality fit the brutality of the world that exists out there, because believe it or not, there are hardened people out there, hardened American-loving people who will in fact go out there and risk their lives, not only for their own families, but for people who despise them. And I would leave those people alone if I were you, if I was one of those big old progressives. I would just leave them alone. I'd be grateful that I lived in a country that allowed me to do all these things, because you don't get to have gay rights parades in Singapore or in Iran or in any of these other places. If you like what you got here, then leave the war fighters alone. They know what they're doing. They're volunteers. They're prepared to defend their freedom, and yours comes along with them. Leave them alone. Support them. You don't have to like what they're doing, but they like what they're doing. So there you go. Let them go. Calla Belchik asks, why are conservatives so mean? Why can't they just get along with everyone else? Isn't that interesting? Our entire theory, conservatism, is about getting along with everyone else. Conservatism is about being left alone and going on your own life. I want to be left alone. Hey, Scotty Ott. How are you, buddy? The famous Scott Ott here is I think it's the first time I've seen him in our comment section watching the show live. My partner from Trifecta, Scott Ott, ladies and gentlemen. No, why are conservatives so mean? Why can't they just get along with everyone else? We're the ones who are fighting to be able to get along with everyone else. We're the ones who are trying to say, I want to be left alone. That means you get to be left alone. They say conservatives are mean because conservatives are not afraid of the truth, and they're not afraid to speak the truth. This political correctness started out as a way to not argue, and it's just turned into something more than that now. It was originally designed by progressives so that they wouldn't have to, have arguments that they're going to lose on the basis of the facts and stuff. So political correctness was designed so that you didn't have to argue with conservatives because they're mean. Why should we argue with mean people? Well, because they're right. But now it's gotten to the point where there's been so much political correctness for so long that now we're at a place where we've got 25, 30 years of people, a generation or two, where just the idea of any kind of a disagreement, forget about violent disagreement, forget about even enthusiastic disagreement, just disagreeing with somebody causes them to have trigger warnings, and they begin to freak out, and they begin to have little conniption fits. And it's like, you argued with me, you disagreed with me. I had persons stomp out of a room crying, didn't even stop, just went out of the room crying. Why is she leaving the room crying? Well, you were mean to her. Well, she called me a murderer, and I told her I wasn't. So suddenly it's my fault that she's out of the room crying? No, it's her fault. She's an adult, presumably, although you wouldn't know it these days. So we're not mean. We're honest. We like to talk about things that matter. And this niceness that you're talking about, by the way, this liberal niceness, is the niceness that they hold towards people that agree with them. But when you listen to them talk about Christians or conservatives or soldiers or the rich or the one percenters, you will not find more hate-filled individuals than American progressives. Or Western progressives. They are the most hate-filled people in the world. They would really very quickly hang everybody who they disagree with. If you said to the Occupy Wall Street crowd, what do you think we ought to do with those bankers inside that building? Most of them would say string them up. I don't know any conservatives that say we should string up people. I know a lot of conservatives who say we should get people motivated to get themselves up, but I don't know anybody who's talking about killing people or making them go away. That's what progressives do. It's what socialists do. You can't have socialism on earth unless everybody's pulling together. People won't pull together because people won't work for other people as hard as they work for themselves. So the socialist utopia fails. So why is it failing? It's failing because of the wreckers, and it's failing because of the kulaks, and it's failing because of the Jews, or it's failing because of the rich, or it's failing because of the bankers, or it's failing because of the one percenters, or it's failing because of somebody. Kill them all, and once you've killed them all, everything will be fine. Except that it doesn't. It just means you've got a lot of dead people. We're not mean. They're the hate mongers. I know hundreds of people who are conservatives who have liberal friends because we're exposed to liberal viewpoints every single day. And I can't tell you how many stories I've heard from those same people, of people who they were at Thanksgiving for every Thanksgiving of their lives. Person found out they voted for George Bush, never speak to them again, this kind of thing. There's a lot of hate out there, all right, and it's not on our team, it's on the other team. I bet you 95% of the total amount of venom, actual venom, and I'm not talking about robust argument, because I'm in favor of robust argument. But this kind of, they should be taken out and they should be shot, or they should be deported, or they should be, that's all the progressives. That's all the progressives. Listen to where the hate is. And don't take my word for it. Just look at the rhetoric, look at the signs, look at the language, look at just the language of the signs between the Tea Party and Occupy Wall Street. Just look at the language. Forget about what they're saying. Forget about their political goals. Forget about what it is they're trying to communicate. Just look at the emotional tone. The Tea Party group is like, we want lower taxes. Occupy Wall Street is F those effing murderers, and they're dangerous people. And that's the ultimate reason why we're all heavily armed, is to protect ourselves from the people who don't know how to play with others. So there we go. Zachariah Tiemens says, feminism got women the right to vote, to own land, to equal pay, to be secure in their own bodies, and so on. So if you aren't a feminist, why do you hate women's rights? I'm not a feminist, and I don't hate women's rights. I don't buy the tribe's bullshit. I don't know if I've ever said that word on the Stratosphere Lounge out loud. I'm sorry, I just couldn't think of another alternative. But that's just it. I don't buy the tribe's bullshit. I don't buy it. I don't believe it. It's a lie. It's a lie designed to gain political power. I believe in a person's rights. Do I believe in a woman's rights? I believe in Mary Smith's rights. And Mary Smith doesn't have any more rights or any fewer rights than John Smith or anybody else. You have rights, and your rights are your rights as individual citizens of the United States. So when you start getting into women's rights, gay rights, Hispanic rights, black rights, you're back into social engineering, and you're back away from individual justice in order to achieve a political goal and to get some money that you didn't make. There you go. To the degree that feminism was about equalizing women's legal access to the world, then feminism is a great movement. And to the degree that I think that women are fully equal human beings, needless to say, I'm in favor of everything that reaches them to a level of equality. But once we start talking about things where we are no longer equal, excuse me, got a little tickle in my throat. Pardon me one moment. Once we get to the point past equality, and we start getting to the point of special treatment, then we're now talking about creating new injustice. And I'm not in favor of creating new injustice because, first of all, even if the new injustice was applied towards the people who had committed the old injustice, that doesn't make justice. Secondly, the people who are talking about this new injustice as a corrective, things like reparations or, special treatment, Title IX, all this crap, they're whipping people who've been dead for 3 generations. And they're hurting new people who are here now in order to get back at people who've been dead for 3 generations who you can't touch anyway. So feminism should be about achieving legal equality. Earlier somebody said, don't you believe people should be equal? Equal under the law, yes. So anything that's moving black people, Hispanic people, Asian people, gay people, women, anybody towards equality, legal equality only, legal equality under the law, I'm in favor of, and when I get to that point, it's time to stop. And that's the ultimate argument that I'm going to make somewhere in here, is this idea that this reason we're called conservatives now is because we're all classical liberals who believe in the philosophy of classical liberalism to the point where it was at maximum operational efficiency, and everything that's happened in the last 100 years since the progressive movement has made traditional liberalism worse. So we're in favor of stopping now and going back in some cases. We're conservatives because we're trying to conserve the ideas of classical liberalism, which is private property, individual rights, limited government, weapons, individuality. That's what classical liberalism is. So anything that's in favor of individual rights, I'm in favor of too. When it starts getting into social engineering, social justice, all the rest of this nonsense, and start talking about people getting special treatment, then I stop. Then it's time to conserve what I said originally. There you go. Reed Hill says, if capitalism is so great, why does it create such wealth disparities between the top and the bottom of the wealth scale? Isn't such a system inherently unfair? No, Reed, it's inherently fair. It's inherently fair. This is the thing that we've got to just go directly at from this point forward. These wealth disparities are not injustice. If you have a completely free market, and we don't, but that's the goal, but if you had a completely free market and a legal system where everyone had legal equality under the law, then these disparities are not a sign of injustice, they're a sign of justice. They're a sign of individual people making decisions to work harder or less hard, to get more education or less, to party or to study, every single person making their own choice without coercion on their own lights based on their own degree of what they perceive happiness to be. And the results of a system like that will produce vast amounts of inequality because people are making different choices. Different choices. And the only way you can legislate people into all being the same is by taking away everybody's choice and telling them what to do. So it is not just to have a society where everybody makes the same amount of money. If you actually think that a 17-year-old, you have two 17-year-olds who both have 120 IQs, let's just say, and one of them studies for 20 years to be a brain surgeon, and the other one sits out back behind the 7-Eleven, smokes weed all day, and does nothing but hang out with his loser buddies. If you tell me that both those people deserve to make the same amount of money, then that is a horrible, cruel, vicious, venal, awful, evil thing to say. Inequality of income is almost certainly in America today the result of inequality of abilities and effort, period. And to say that everybody should be equal when people don't have equal abilities, but especially don't have equal efforts, is vile. It's evil. And once you get past this, by the way, once you start asking students if everybody in the class should get a C, should everybody get a C? Should we just give everybody C's in this class? You know what happens when you ask the class that question? The D students and the F students say yes. The A students and the B students say no. Why? Because making everybody get a C benefits some people at the cost of other people. That's not fair. It's not fair. It's not right. It's not good. And when you start doing that to people, then what you are doing is you're not only just putting an incentive towards lowering everybody's output and everybody's wealth and everybody's opportunity, you are in fact capping it. And you are limiting, if you want to make equal incomes, then everybody will make the income of the least capable, laziest person. And everything other than that is just stealing. So if I'm going to make $25,000 a year as a 7-Eleven clerk, by the way, just so we're crystal clear on this, there is absolutely nothing dishonorable about being a 7-Eleven clerk. On the contrary, people who work at 7-Elevens have my undying respect. It's a difficult job, it's a dangerous job, and it takes a lot of weird long hours, and God bless them, and they're working hard for a living, and they're making their money, honestly, good for them. But if you're telling me that that somebody who's basically taken their entire life and thrown it away having fun, which is their business and their choice, should now downstream be rewarded the same as somebody who has worked and worked and worked and worked and worked, then I will tell you two things. First of all, that's an evil thing to do. It's not just unfair or wrong or bad. It's evil. And secondly, you will demotivate the people who would have worked. And you're not going to have any brain surgeons anymore. You're going to have just 7-Eleven clerks, because it's easier to be a 7-Eleven clerk than it is to be a brain surgeon. Right? It's much easier. And if you don't get the extra reward for the extra work, then what is going to happen is you're not going to have any brain surgeons, and that's what the Soviet Union is. It's a world of people where nobody tries harder and nobody does anything because there's no reason to do anything. There's no reason for it. Why is it that these socialist countries that everybody just rails about, oh, it's so wonderful, the income equality is so wonderful, everybody's so happy, why don't they produce anything? Ever, 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 ever. Why don't we ever see anything come from these countries? Ever. Never, ever do we see that happening. Why? It's because there's no reason to. It's bred out of these people. A guy in a garage in America can write an app that could make him a billionaire. Just look at what's his name, Facebook guy. He strikes me. Zuckerberg strikes me. Zuckerberg. I can't remember his name. Mark Zuckerberg. He strikes me, frankly, as one of the most vile people in the world. And I saw the Social Network, and it did not soften my opinion of him. He struck me as a guy who's pretty bright, but basically pretty venal and pretty creepy. He's worth billions of dollars today. And the reason he's worth billions of dollars today is because he came up with something that allows me to announce my show to everybody else. He's worth every penny. Mark Zuckerberg is worth every dime of his money. He's worth every single dime. Now, maybe he did some backhanded deals, and there's a lot of stuff in that movie that says he's not a good guy and actually cheated. To the degree that he cheated, he needs to be sued or put in jail. But when you get down to the brass tacks, he produced something absolutely spectacular. And I don't believe that we would have a Facebook today if the people who got involved in Facebook, just as one example, if the people who got Facebook off the ground had not seen millions of dollars, turned out it was billions, but if it weren't for the fact that they'd seen millions of dollars in it, then they wouldn't have done it. And the final thing I'll say about this wealth creation thing is this. I know a lot of people who are millionaires, and everybody I know who's a millionaire, I don't know lots, I know probably 5, 6, 7. Everybody I know who became a millionaire because of something that they wanted to do. Not one of the millionaires that I know, not one, said, I want to be a millionaire because I want to be a millionaire. Let me find something I can go make $1 million at. I've never seen that happen, by the way. I've never seen it happen. The millionaires I know are people who said, I got to do something. There's something I can do to improve this. There's a better way to do this. Or here's something that has never been done, or wouldn't it be cool if? And then they do it. And third or fourth down the list of things that enter their mind is, you know what, I'm actually make a lot of money doing that. And I'm a perfect example of that, by the way, because there are stories I have to tell and there are things I have to say. And I said them on Eject. I said them whether people paid me or not. I said them whether people listen or not. I did it for the reason that I had to do it. I had to do it. I was passionate about it. I wanted to do it. To the degree I'm good at it, people started paying me. And to the degree that people are paying me, then the more I do, the more I make. And that's fair. It's not fair that the more... Why would I possibly be coming in here 7 days a week, staying till 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night if I didn't think that I could get ahead of it, that I could have opportunities to do things like fly a Viper jet, for example? Why would I do it? I wouldn't. And so everybody else doesn't. And then you have universal poverty, which is the universal poverty that these socialists want. The progressives want this stuff because they're lazy. This is not a moral advantage to be lazy. They're lazy. And so when people succeed, they do two things. They say, well, first of all, that makes me look bad. They did it. I didn't. So I got the sense of guilt and the sense of shame and the sense of all this other stuff. But what they really say is, how come this guy has 5 houses and I don't have any? When you get down to brass tacks, there are millions of exceptions, needless to say. When you get down to brass tacks, the guy has 5 houses and you don't, because either he or his parents made decisions that allowed them to maximize their willingness to work and find something new. Now, when I say work, I'm not necessarily talking about hours or physical labor. There are janitors who work very, very hard and make very little money. But if you wanted to make money as a janitor and you really had the idea that you wanted to be a janitor millionaire, you wanted to be a millionaire and all you knew how to do was be a janitor, if you really wanted that, you would find a way to get in touch with the people who would tell you how to set up your own janitorial service business, and then you would be a millionaire janitor. And it's just that simple. And as Dave Big Booty just pointed out, perfect coded to the end of this thing, this poverty is the default human condition because laziness is the default human condition. The reason the world has so much wealth now is because America was the first time in the first place in the history of the planet that let people alone and gave them a chance to keep what they made. It's the land of opportunity. Why do you think all the hardworking immigrants from around the world for 200 years got in a boat, threw whatever they had into a bag, and got on a boat and came to some place they'd never seen before? What was it about America? They said the streets were paved with gold. Nobody actually believed that the streets are actually paved with gold. It's a metaphor for the idea that if you were be left alone and you worked hard enough, you could afford to pave the golden streets because people would let you. And of course, that's why everybody has to have it destroyed. That when you hear these progressives talking about, well, Europe this and Europe that and Europe this and Europe that, well, we should be more like Europe. Less successful, you mean? Lazier, you mean? More envious, you mean? 2 months off in the summer, which is why I love that Cadillac commercial so much, and 35-hour work weeks, and all these benefits that we're not working for or paying for, and have somebody else pay for it, or the future pay for it, or whatever. Have the Americans pay for our defense, blah, 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 blah. It's not for everybody, but it's even, see, this is what I said a few minutes ago. Even for the slackers, it's a great place to be, because it's a good place to be a slacker. But it doesn't mean that we have to let the slackers tell us that we're not allowed to work anymore. And ultimately, as Ayn Rand was so clearly tuned into. It's not like they don't want us to work. The slackers do want us to work. They just want us to work and give us their stuff. Give them our stuff. And I'm against that. So there you go. Because it's unfair and evil. Eddie Hernandez says, if America is so great, why is the U.S. dollar so weak? The Europeans are much happier than us, and the euro has more purchasing power. Well, Eddie, that's a complex question, so let's get started. If America is so great, why is the U.S. dollar so weak? For most of the history of the U.S. dollar, the dollar was the best currency in the world. Sound as a dollar. Dollar was a private form of paper money. It was originally called the Dutch thaler. And the thaler, like many of the other private monies, there were private monies out there. Individual banks, individual holdings, individual cartels and groups had their own money. And one of them was a Dutch holding bank, and they issued a piece of paper called a thaler, and the thaler was sound. It had plenty of resources. You could take a paper thaler and exchange it for actual genuine gold, and that became the dollar, and sound as a dollar was the appropriate description of the U.S. currency for most of the currency lifetime. Dollar was great, because it was based on gold, and you can't print gold. You can only print money. And the more money you print, the less the money is worth. So America started getting into trouble when we started to have things like the Federal Reserve Bank and so on and so forth. The gold standard is a tricky subject, and I'll be perfectly honest with you, I don't know quite enough about that. I'm certainly in favor of the gold standard on ideological purposes. There's an argument to be made that the economy exploded much faster than the amount of gold in the world, that you in fact need more money than gold can produce, or that gold can represent, can be exchanged for, without degrading the value of everything. And so there's arguments to be made there. But the short form of your answer, Eddie, is that the dollar has become weak recently because of the welfare state. Because people want to be given things for free, and they'll vote for politicians who will spend money that we don't have. 40% of all of the expenditures that the United States makes right now are 40 cents on the dollar is 40 cents that we don't have. And every single year, we put another 40 cents for every dollar we spend we don't have. And we owe it. And it gets more and more and more and more and more. So the answer is, yes, it's true. The dollar is weak because we have a wretched and horrible political class who has no sense of the future, no sense of long-term, no sense of integrity, no sense of honor, courage, decency, or anything. They will exchange their honor and their sense of the future of the country in exchange for another 2 years or 6 years of feeding at the public trough and being called the honorable this and riding around in big cars that they couldn't afford otherwise, or having political power to get themselves the businesses that they would not be able to maintain otherwise. So that doesn't make us unique, but that's what happened. And really, once you start the progressive movement, once you start talking about social benefits, then you start talking about the government providing social benefits, then you run into trouble because unlike private citizens, like a church, let's say, wanted to provide benefits for its congregation. What a swell idea that is. Let's just say there's a socialist collective church and they want to take enormous amounts of money from their congregation and use that money to disperse equally among the members of the congregation and make sure nobody was out in the cold and everything was cool and everybody in the church agreed. And if you didn't like it, you could leave and go to another church. And other people who did like it would come to this church. So far, so good. But the difference between that church and the government is the church can't print their own money. The church can only disperse what it takes in. And that means it's fundamentally sound. But when you've got a government doing that instead of a church, and it's taking in $1 and it wants to pay out $2, well, then it takes in $1 and hands that back out, prints another $1, and there you go. And then suddenly the currency becomes worth less. And as it continues to become worth less and worth less and worth less, pretty soon it's worthless. And that's where we're heading. And we're virtually there. Now, as far as the second part of the question, I'm not convinced that the Europeans are happier than the U.S. It's no question that the people in Scandinavia have a higher level of happiness than Americans do. But a higher level of happiness than what part of America? First of all, you have, when you talk about Norway or Sweden's happiness, are we fully accounting for the happiness of the unassimilated Muslim parts of those countries, in France and so on? Are we counting them? Are they happy? And also, when we talk about happier than the U.S., happier than 300 million people, 100 million of which are in a state of perpetual dependency. If you were to ask conservatives about their state of happiness, you'd find that if you just polled American conservatives, you'd find that America was the happiest place in the world by a wide margin. Wide margin. So you got to take that into account too, because American conservatives are happy because we have the sense that our destiny is under our control. I read a really interesting article just 2 days ago about the mortality rates in Russia, and that Russia mortality is 10 years, 15 years almost now, lower than it was during the Soviet Union. And alcoholism is rampant, and number of industrial accidents, people just being killed in, in helicopter crashes and train collapses and all this other stuff. So the question was, why is Russian mortality so high? And they looked at it, compared to economic periods of growth, and they looked at it during the Soviet Union, they looked at it after the fall of the Soviet Union, and they couldn't find a correlation. They only found 2 periods of time when Russian mortality declined significantly. And those 2 times were in the Khrushchev thaw after the death of Stalin. Khrushchev, after Stalin died in 1953, there was probably a 6-year, 7-year interregnum, and then Khrushchev comes to power, and he starts liberalizing the country. And at that point, Russian mortality went down. Their number of surviving people went up. Alcoholism went down, accidents went down, all that other stuff. The other time it went down in Russia was right after the collapse of the Soviet Union in the early 90s, when it looked like they may be able to transition to a capitalist economy, and before all the kleptocracy took over, which resulted in the counter-reformation of Putin and all the authority and so on. The only 2 times in the history of the modern Russia where the Russian mortality rate has gone down, now listen carefully because this is the point, Eddie, was during those 2 brief periods where the Russian people had a sense of hope. They had a sense of hope, actual hope, not this nonsense crap that was posted on billboards to cover power grabs and mediocrity. Actual hope. What did those 2 periods, when the mortality rate in the Russian Federation and the Soviet Union go down, what did those 2 periods have in common in terms of hope? Those were the 2 periods in modern Russian history, and the only 2 periods in modern Russian history, where Russian people thought that they might have a chance to be the masters of their own destiny, period, full stop, end of sentence. That's it. So when you talk about happiness, I don't know. I mean, there's a certain amount of happiness to be derived, I suppose, from not having to worry about whether or not you're going to be able to make your rent for that month. But I'm telling you, it is not equivalent to the amount of happiness that comes with being able to become the person you want to be. I have not ever met a happy Scandinavian, not in America anyway. I've met contented Scandinavians, and that's really the word for them, I think, because I don't think we're really talking about happiness here. I think we're talking about contentedness. We're certainly not talking about euphoria or joy, because if you're talking about joy, you got a whole different aspect going here. I don't think I've ever met an uncontented Scandinavian, and I've never met somebody who I would consider actually happy in the way I know happy Americans. They're contented. In fact, P.G. O'Rourke or somebody was talking about this. I think somebody was talking about there's a word in either Swedish or Norwegian, and it's the term they use if somebody has a dinner party, and you go to the dinner party and you ask the guests, "How did you enjoy the dinner party?" And the word they use is, "It was sufficient." Just enough is the word they're using. Just enough. It was enough to eat so that I'm not hungry, but it wasn't extravagant. It wasn't crazy. It wasn't. That's pretty much the Scandinavian thing. Sufficient, just enough. So if you're telling me that that the Greeks are happier than Americans, I don't know if I buy it, and I don't know if I buy any of this stuff. I just think that happiness and economic freedom are related. There's no question the American dollar has been destroyed by printing all this money. I can't argue with you there. I wish I could. And to say the euro has more purchasing power, you have to understand something about this euro business and this giant lie that is the EU. And the best way to look at the lie that's the EU, Eddie, is to say, which one is it? Because if you look at Wikipedia for the largest economy in the world, you'll see number 1 is the EU. It's the biggest economy in the world. It's bigger than America. And then as you go down the list of the EU, United States, China, down the list, then all of a sudden you see Germany, and then you see Britain, and then you see France, and then you see Italy. So which one is it? Is it Italy or is it the EU? If it's the EU, there should be no entry for Britain or Germany or Italy or France. And if it's not, if there is in fact a French economy, then the EU is not really deserving of the biggest economy in the world. And I'm not the first person to say this, and I don't think it's going to take a whole lot more convincing. The EU is being held together by unelected supranational political strings. But if you actually think that the Germans and the Greeks can agree on anything, then you got another thing coming. It's just a matter of time until this thing falls apart. I don't think it's that much time. The Germans are working like crazy to pay for the Greeks goofing off. It's just like here in America, except we don't call them Germans and Greeks. But we have Germans and Greeks here. We have people who work very hard and are disciplined and hardworking and productive and have foresight and plan and all that other stuff. Then we have a bunch of people who just basically want to drink kuzu all day and kick back and, enjoy the sun. So we'll see. I got a pretty good feeling that weak though the dollar is, there'll be a dollar longer than there will be a euro. I got a real strong feeling that'll be the case. And the reason is because this is an actual nation and the European Union isn't a nation. And we weren't a nation before the Civil War, but we've been fighting now as a group, these 50 states, long enough so that we're a nation. The United States, the difference between Oklahoma and Alabama is trivial compared to the difference between Norway and Portugal. So, Chris Taylor says, why should I listen to you? You are a hypocrite. In what way am I a hypocrite? A hypocrite means somebody who is undercritical. Where am I undercritical? Am I a hypocrite about my own moral code? There's no question to some degree I'm a hypocrite about my own moral code, but that's because I have a moral code. And if I didn't have a moral code, I wouldn't be a hypocrite. But I try to live up to my moral code, and I think most conservatives do too. You're going to have to do better than that, Chris. If you want to say, why should I listen to you, you're a hypocrite, what are you talking about? I think the only place the left has what appears to be, at least to their eyes, a legitimate claim of hypocrisy on the part of conservatives is with the abortion issue, and to some degree the gay rights issue. So I'll give you an answer on both of those, at least my personal answer. The gay rights issue is, you conservatives say you want to be left alone and that everybody should be allowed to do what they want to do, so it's none of your business if two men get married. My personal response is, I agree with that statement. It is none of my business. I don't care if gay people get married. It doesn't bother me the slightest. I've been around theater people my whole life. I know a lot of gay people, and just like everybody else I know, some of them are very nice and some of them are complete jerks. Just depends on the individual, really. I don't have any business to tell them what to do with their lives. I don't have any business to tell them whether they can get married or not. I don't care. This is me speaking. I don't care. However, I do care, very much care, about whether or not I am going to be forced to conform to anything that I agree with or disagree with by either the coercive force of the government or by the softer but probably more pervasive coercive force of the culture. So while I don't particularly care whether people get married or not, they will not be able to tell me whether or not I approve of it. I don't care, and I don't think I have any right to tell them whether they get married or not, but they cannot force me to accept anything that I don't want to accept philosophically, religiously, or spiritually, or whatever. And there's a much deeper and more important issue than that, and that is this. When you get to this conflict between Christianity or people who have religious objections to gay marriage, what they, I think, mostly are concerned about is they do not want to be told that they have to accept something that they believe to be a sin. And of that, I am so deep in agreement, I can't even begin to tell you. So do I want it both ways? I don't want it both ways. I have a consistent moral belief system. I don't believe in coercion, which means that if you get the government out of the marriage business, you don't have any problems. If the government is out of the marriage business, you don't have any problems. If two gay people want to get married and they can find a congregation that wants to marry them, fine. But if there's a congregation that says that we think homosexuality is a sin, that's fine too. And just as I don't think those Christians in the backwoods of Alabama, to pick the most facile example I can find, have any business telling whether two gay men get married in San Francisco. Likewise, I don't think two gay men in San Francisco have any business telling people in the backwoods of Alabama what they can believe or not believe. If people want to believe that it's a sin and an abomination, that's their right. And so much of this pushback on the part of this sort of anti-gay agenda is in fact pushing back against a political agenda that's not about equality or acceptance. It's about making you conform to their belief system about all this stuff. And when you realize that the population of America, the gay population, is probably 2 or 3%, and most Americans think it's 25%, you realize that there is in fact a serious effort on the part of the homosexual political activists to remodel and re-engineer Americans' attitudes about things that they have no business doing. None. So when I think about the gay marriage issue, I consult my Constitution. Does it say anything about gay marriage? It does not. It's not a federal issue. It doesn't say anything about straight marriage either, by the way, which means that's also not an issue. And as usual, you can blame the Democrats for this. You didn't need marriage licenses before because the Democrats wanted to get the government involved in marriage because the Democrats didn't want black people marrying white people. All of this is a result of these marriage licenses and all this government intrusion and legitimacy of marriage through the government as a result of the Democrats trying to keep black people down, which is what they've done for their entire history, starting in the Civil War when they backed the slavery, backed the Confederacy, backed the Ku Klux Klan, backed the Jim Crow laws, backed the turning of the fire hoses on those civil rights protesters. They're all Democrats. And now they're trying to keep them on the slavery plantation so that they can harvest their votes. That's where we got into trouble with the gay marriage thing. I say let people alone. And letting them alone means to gay people, oh, it means letting us get married, right? Yes. It also means letting people think that you're monsters and you don't have a right to change their mind. Either they find your behavior personally appalling or they find your behavior religiously appalling. That's as much their business as you doing what you want to do is yours. So you just have to live with it. That's the way it goes. No coercion. Just get the coercion out of it. You're just stuck with being offended. No one has a right not to be offended. The second thing is the abortion issue, and that's a super tough one until it's suddenly not. When you talk about when you talk to liberals and they'll say you conservatives are such hypocrites, you talk about leaving people alone and getting the government out of our lives. Who are you to say that, I can't go get an abortion? I can't go get an abortion because it's my body. And that's where the lie is right there. You're going to stop it right there. It's not your body. It is my body. No, it's not. It's not your body. It's in your body, but it's not your body. You take the cells out of that fetus and you do a genetic test on that fetus, and you will come up with a completely, absolutely unique individual. That unborn child that woman is carrying, that fetus, that embryo, whatever you want to call it, has its unique genetic information, its own genetic structure. It is a unique individual, and I could take its cell from that fetus and I could take a cell from that woman and absolutely distinguish them 100% of the time. It's not your body. It is not your body. It's not your cells. It's not your genome. It's not your genetics. It's different. It's different. So the question is it a person, yes or no? Well, if it's a person half an hour before the baby would have been born, or a half an hour after it's born, if it doesn't change between a half hour after it's born and a half hour before it's born, then it looks like it's a person. And since birth is just basically two milestones, conception and birth, there's nothing in between. There's not like all of a sudden on day 39 something magical happens. Nope, it's a gradient between conception and birth. If it's a baby when it's born, then it's a baby all the way back. And that's just the logical outcome of it. So it's a tough one. I mean, morally it's not tough. I think morally it's very simple. But people disagree with this argument. And then you get back into the coercive power of the government again. And frankly, if I could get the coercive power of the government out of my life, I'd put up with some of these things and I would fight the abortion battle on a moral basis rather than a legal one. There you go. And somebody in the comment section says, do you have a right to what about your right to marry your dog? I can marry my office chair if I want to. I mean, seriously. Look, if I find a preacher and forget, like I said, imagine you get the government out of this, right? And if I can find a religious figure or somebody to claim that I'm married to my dog, does that degrade your marriage, or does that make me look like a flaming lunatic? Which one? I mean, honestly, I understand the work that marriage is. And there's one. I will say this in defense of traditional marriage. This is one thing I will go all the way to the bat on. I'm in favor of if you want to call yourself. I just wish they would just not use the word marriage, because the lexicological argument is powerful, strong to me. In other words, the people who are saying no. Marriage, the definition of marriage is a man and a woman. I completely agree with that. 100% I agree with that. Do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? Do you take this to be your husband? The definition of a husband is somebody who marries a wife. The definition of a wife is somebody who marries a husband. Having two husbands in the same marriage is not marriage. I'm kind of okay with, in fact, I'm completely okay with something that's completely legally equal, spiritually equal. I don't care. But this business about the vocabulary argument is very powerful to me, and I'll give you another example of the vocabulary argument, in the sense that if it's a man and a woman, if it's not a man and a woman, it's not marriage by definition. I think that's a really strong argument. It's just a question of the word, but if you start allowing words to be destroyed, then you're done. So here's a great example. I think this is really how I feel about it. Let's say that I have an Uncle Bob. I don't, but let's say I did. And let's say Uncle Bob was a transvestite. And let's say Uncle Bob liked dressing up in women's clothes. Okay, that's what Uncle Bob does. Now, if Uncle Bob says to me, I want to dress in women's clothes all the time, and I'd like you to call me Aunt Bobby, then depending on how I feel about Uncle Bob, I'd probably be more than happy to call him Aunt Bobby, or call her Aunt Bobby. And if this person said to me, I see myself as a female, would you mind referring to me as she? Look, I'm actually pretty easy to get along, believe it or not. I really don't much care. It doesn't take a lot of skin off my nose for me to call somebody she if they want to get called she. But here's where we draw the line. If Uncle Bob then says to me, I've had a sex change operation, I've had a complete sex change operation, sex reassignment surgery. I don't have the male parts anymore, and we've used them to fashion versions of female parts. So therefore, Bill, since I have this woman's body now, and since I have a female identity, you have to agree that I'm a woman. And that's where I get off the bus. Because you're not, Bob, or Aunt Bobby, you're not a woman. You're a male who has psychological propensities that makes you identify with the feminine gender. I don't care. You've gone through a series of surgical procedures to snip things up and open up things here and move things around there, and I don't care about that either. That's none of my business. I don't care. But if you are asking me to say that by doing these two things you have become a woman, no, Bob, you haven't. Bobby, Aunt Bobby, no. I'm happy to be a get-along guy. I don't care. You want to be called Aunt Bobby? Fine. But if you're asking me to tell you that I have to accept this new version of the reality, then no. That's where I get off. Get off the boat here. Because you're not a woman. Because women have X chromosomes, 2 sets, X and X. Men have X and Y. And you can do whatever you want to yourself. You can have whatever opinion you want about gender. But if I take a cell out of your bloodstream, I'm going to find out that you're a male. So you're a male with psychological unusual tendencies. And you've gone through a series of surgeries. But you're not a woman, Bob. I'm sorry. No, that's where I'm not going to go. So there you go. That's how I feel about it. I'm willing to get along with people and do pretty much whatever makes things easiest, as long as they're not asking me to change the face of reality, because I'm married to reality. I'm married to the truth. That's who I'm married to. I'm married to reality and to telling the truth. And you can do all these things to make you more comfortable, but that doesn't make you a woman, Bob. Sorry. And no matter how many changes you make and no matter how much you wish it were true, you cannot have children. So when you hear these stories about man got pregnant, it's like, oh, really? A man got pregnant? Did he really? Well, it turns out it was a woman who has had some sex reassignment things, who wants to be a man or dresses like a man, that's not a woman. And it's not a man either. So there you go. It's just the truth. And I don't care, Bob, that you really, 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 really want to be a woman, and that it's really, 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 really unfair that you're not. Life isn't fair. I want to be a fighter pilot. 2025 vision right here. Everything else good to go. Nope, that's it. So I'll go fly jets if I can, and if I can afford to buy a jet someday through hard work, then I will work hard, and I'll get as close as I can. As a matter of fact, if I work hard enough and get the kind of performance I might be able to get if I had a ton of money, might even be better than being a fighter pilot. No, it won't actually, because there's nothing as satisfying as watch a communist go into a ball of flames. But nevertheless, you can get close. That's what you get out of life. You get a chance to get close, but you don't always get what you want, and sometimes you don't get what you want very badly, and that's the way it goes. And if you don't accept that, then you probably have other problems that are causing you to become a progressive. And it's all based on your inability to accept the fact that you don't get everything you want. It's basically the philosophy of 3-year-olds. I want this. Well, you can't have it. Well, I want it. Well, you can't have it. Well, if I want it enough, I can have it. No, you can't. There you go. Ben Hoffman says, Bill, don't you know global warming will destroy the Earth? How can you hate polar bears? I don't hate polar bears. I think they're awesome. We'll do the whole global warming thing sometime soon. The shortest form I can give you is this regarding the global warming thing. I saw, forgive me if I've told this story before, there was a gigantic network special on global warming back around 2004 or 5 or so, and I'm not sure exactly, but let's just say it was NBC News, and let's just say it was Tom Brokaw. But it was that quality thing. One of the 3 major networks, 4 then I guess, major networks with a major news anchor hosting it. And this special began with him at the shores of the Arctic Ocean, with the waves lapping at his feet just a few yards behind him on the stony beach. And at the very beginning of this thing on global warming, he turned to the camera and he said, the last time that the Arctic Ocean has been ice-free in September was 20 million years ago. Global warming is real and it's a threat. And everybody in the country went, oh. And I went, whose SUVs and coal-fired plants made it water 20 million years ago? If it was liquid 20 million years ago, if it's been 20 million years since this has happened, then what caused it the last time? Because we weren't here, so it wasn't us. And furthermore, if human activity and global warming didn't cause it to be liquid at this time of year 20 million years ago, how did it recover? Because you're telling us not only has this never happened before, you've just admitted it's happened before. You've also told us that it's irreversible, that once, boy, it's done. It's game over, man. Game over. Got to give us all your money and all your freedom and all your power right now. Just hand it to us and we'll save the planet. Well, if it was liquid 20 million years ago, and we're trying to prevent it from being liquid in September again, that means it's been ice between now and then, and it's been ice between now and then. Why? Kansas was under a mile of ice at one point, and Kansas was under 150 feet of water at another point. Once it was a frozen solid wasteland, then it was a beautiful tropical biome filled with plesiosaurs and with pterodactyls and ferns and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of species of animals, and they've all gone because of these catastrophically low carbon dioxide levels and suboptimal temperatures. So which climate do you want to protect? The Earth's climate has been changing since there's been an Earth. There's not been a period of constant temperatures where suddenly change occurs. It's in a constant state of flux. And the final thing to say about the Earth's climate is this. If the Earth climate had a positive biofeedback mechanism where any change caused greater change, which is what they're claiming is happening with carbon dioxide, where once you put carbon dioxide in, it gets warmer, and then the warmer it gets, the faster it gets warmer. If that were true, the Earth would be a cinder. And likewise, it would be a snowball. The Earth obviously has negative feedback mechanisms, powerful ones at work, because the Earth has maintained more or less the same temperature for 4.5 billion years. But during that 4.5 billion years, carbon dioxide levels have been 3 times higher than they are now. They've been considerably lower than they are now. It's been much hotter, much colder. Sea levels been higher and lower. But the Earth has been habitable the whole time, although it did get too cold. There is a world where the Earth gets too cold and there's too little carbon. That's a danger. But basically, the point I'm trying to make is this guy went out there to tell you this sad tale of woe because the Earth was like this 20 million years ago, and apparently nobody else in the entire country said, well, who caused it 20 million years ago? Nobody did. It did it on its own. And, there's this guy, forgetting his name now, I met him, Bjorn something, the skeptical environmentalist or climatologist or something, and he basically says, for example, these are little things, but for example, People say, well, if the global temperatures rise, hundreds of thousands of people are going to die each year from heat stroke. Hundreds of thousands of people more are going to die every year because of heat stroke. That's true. But millions of people who would have died otherwise will live because they won't freeze to death. More people die of freezing to death than they die of heat stroke. So the warmer the Earth gets, the number of lives actually saved, but they never mention that. Sea levels have risen about a foot in the last 100 years. They say it might raise another foot or two in the next 150 years. Look, if we were to avoid drowning by taking a foot inland in the last 100 years when we had wooden wagon wheels and horses for horsepower, shouldn't be too tough for us to do this in the future with nuclear power and hydraulics and computers and all the rest of it. So the Earth is constantly changing. It changes all the time. It changes slowly, fortunately. And if they were making the case that this was something that had never happened in history, I would pay attention. That's the case they made originally, and I paid attention. When they stopped calling it global warming and started calling it climate change, they lost the argument, because the climate's always been changing. That's when I knew they were lying. When they no longer were saying man-made global warming, when that went out the window, because it wasn't warming anymore. It's been 17, 18, 19 years without any significant warming. Once they stopped calling it warming because they weren't seeing warming, that was when they lost the argument. And the final thing I'll say about the economic argument is, if I'm Al Gore, and I genuinely believe that the Earth is going to die because of too much carbon dioxide, if I actually genuinely believe it, then I would not have a house that used 30 times more electricity than the average citizen of Tennessee. In other words, if I believed in my heart of hearts that eating grapes was going to cause the end of life on Earth, I wouldn't eat 30 times more grapes than the average person in my neighborhood. You'd never see me eat another grape again. Even if I had to have a grape, or if I love grapes, I wouldn't eat them because of the optics of me eating a grape. So if I find myself saying that the Earth is going to die unless we all stop eating grapes, and at the same time I eat 30 times more grapes than the person who's sitting next to me, it's a pretty clear indication that I'm lying to you. We're getting towards the end of this thing. Paul Sullivan says, how can you support the military-industrial complex? I don't support the military-industrial complex. I support the ability of the United States to defend itself with state-of-the-art weapons. They're not the same thing. People are literally profiting from the murder and colonization of the third world, please. Paul, I know all these questions are all sarcastic or spoken in the name of a liberal. But let's just start with the idea of stealing from the third world, and we'll come back. I did a little look into this, and I took a look at the United States economy, and I looked at the economy of Djibouti, which is a poor country. And I looked at the GMP of Djibouti, which is, I think, $1 billion, $1.2 billion, something like that. And so basically, if the United States were to take all of its aircraft carriers and its giant death machine, and led by our oil companies, of course, if we took the giant American corporate death machine into Djibouti and didn't just drill some oil or take some stuff, if we went into Djibouti and we took every single thing that they made in Djibouti that year, we took every single thing. We took all the crops, we took all the oil, all the minerals, we took all of it. We took all of it from Djibouti with our military death machine. It would run the U.S. economy for 2.5 hours. And if we took the bottom 20 countries, it would run the U.S. economy for probably 2 or 3 days. And if we took the bottom 50 out of 150 countries, it might run the U.S. economy for a week. So this idea that this rich, powerful nation is rich and powerful because we stole from the third world is 100% precisely backwards. We pump money into the third world. India is richer today, because of Americans paying money largely through things like phone banks. China, I did a documentary on China in the year 2000, and I couldn't cut footage from the team that went out there in 2000 versus the team that was out there in 1996, because in 96 they were wearing Mao jackets, and in 2000 they all had cell phones. Couldn't cut the two pieces of video together. China became rich overnight from the Stone Age because of American wealth went into China because we bought their products. This idea that we're stealing from the third world is absolute madness. They don't make anything. There's nothing to steal. When you look at the third world, what do you see? When you look at Africa or South America, these dirt poor villages, what do you see? In other words, if you take an outpost of Western imperialism, let's say Santa Monica, California, and you take a pristine part of the Brazilian jungle, and let's say a village out in the middle of the jungles of Africa, what do you see? Well, when you get to, and not even the jungles of Africa, some town in Africa, Nairobi even or something, what do you see in Nairobi? Well, you see people wearing cotton clothing that is mass-produced on looms with cell phones and AK-47s and trucks. And when you go through Santa Monica, you don't see people wearing banana leaves, and you don't see people living in thatched huts. In other words, it's Western wealth, know-how, technology, and everything else is pushed out into the third world and benefits them enormously. And when people say, oh, this tribe is untouched, it's an untouched, pristine tribe. Oh, it's so wonderful. Isn't it so wonderful? What a terrible, terrible, horrible, horrible, horrible crime that Western man has contaminated these poor, lovely people with his presence. What they're really saying is, look at these natives living in a grass hut in the middle of the Amazon wearing T-shirts that say Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on it and a pair of Nike shorts. And what these liberals are really saying, or these progressives are really saying is, isn't that awful? Isn't it awful that we are out there giving people this stuff? Why aren't they wearing leaves like they should be? Well, have you ever worn leaves? And why don't you wear leaves, by the way, up in the hills of Hollywood and Santa Monica? Why aren't you wearing leaves or banana leaves for underwear? Why aren't you wearing leaves or wearing authentic African bush skirts? Why? Because they're bloody, god-awful uncomfortable, that's why. They're filled with parasites and they're uncomfortable, they're horrible, and they're primitive. And so when you see people in cotton clothing in the third world, and you think it's a catastrophe, they're wearing the same clothes you wear, and they're wearing them for the same reasons, because they're well-made and they're comfortable. But you can't have that. It's just part of the anti-humanity hatred that these people have up in the Hollywood Hills and San Francisco. Oh, I wish we hadn't, gotten in there and polluted them with our cotton clothing. I wish they were still wiping their butts with twigs and using drums to communicate. It's this racism and this anti-human disgust and disgrace with people. They want people to live like zoo animals. It's like they want people to live like zoo animals. It's like they feel the same way about the disappearance of the giraffe or the rhinoceros. I want to see authentic people with grass skirts. I don't. Why should they have to wear grass skirts for my amusement? I don't want to wear a grass skirt. I could afford a grass skirt if I wanted to, and I don't wear one because they're god-awful, horrible ways to live. I want to live in some comfort. And if the only comfort these people get is a cotton T-shirt and a pair of shorts, then for God's sakes, let them have some cotton T-shirts and shorts. My God, it's unbelievable. Oh, we stole it from the third world, the military, profiting from the murder and colonization of the third world. There was a period when the British Empire, which was an actual empire, did in fact militarily take resources from the third world and bring it back to Great Britain. And it wasn't just the British, the French did it, and the Spanish built their entire rise and fall around it. When the Spanish came to the New World, they didn't really mostly come to settle and farm and find a frontier and start off on their own the way they did in North America. Now, the Spanish basically came to the New World for gold, and they brought armies and cannons, and they killed the local natives for gold. And they shipped so much gold out of the New World to the Old World. And for 100 years, Spain was ascendant because they were stealing gold. And what it did was it made Spain into what is still the poor man of Europe. They never developed any of the means of making new wealth because they had such easy access to stealing somebody else's wealth until they ran out. And then they're dumb. They're boned. They deserve to be boned. And frankly, if you want to really run this thing off the rails for a little bit, why do people cross the border of Mexico? Why aren't Americans crossing into Canada? Why is it the border of Mexico that's so important? Why is that the place where all the action is? Well, because the border between the United States and Mexico is the border between North America, which was settled primarily by English-speaking Protestants, and South America and Central America, which was settled by primarily Spanish-speaking Catholics. And it's the difference between these two cultures is what makes one part of the New World work better than any place in the world, and the other one a catastrophic failure. Canada and America, we don't see Canadians climbing over the fence to get into America or vice versa because Canada works. Canada works because it's an English-speaking Protestant country. That's how it was settled. It was settled with that work ethic. It was settled with that idea of wealth generation. And South America, from Mexico south, the Mexican border with the U.S. south, is based on limited amounts of wealth, redistribution of wealth, stealing, corruption, and so on. So there you go. And it's pretty clear. And so, this business about us murdering and colonizing the third world, America doesn't do that. We have bases in many countries, and we pay a large amount of money for those bases. And when the countries decide they don't want us anymore, then we leave. And when you look at the amount of money that the U.S. puts into a place like Djibouti, for example, with that one base we have there, we're making people, we're giving them money to spend. It'd be nice if we were giving them jobs that they or teaching them how to generate wealth, but we're not doing that. But they're at least getting money. The wealth flows from the West into the third world, not the other way around, and it hasn't for 150 years now. So get with the program, you miserable low-life left-wing losers. The military-industrial complex is a slightly different issue. It needs to be said that nuclear submarines and fifth-generation stealth fighters are not something you can make in a garage, although you probably can get a lot closer than what we have now. To some degree, you need conglomerations of large corporations, lots of money, highly trained technical staffs, research, development, all this other stuff that make up the Lockheeds and the Boeings and the Northrops and Grummans and all these other companies. All of those companies I generally support, by the way. I think Boeing is a national treasure. I think Lockheed is a national treasure. I think General Dynamics is a national treasure. I think they're all absolutely essential. I think they're doing the most important technological work in the world, but I don't like the way they go about procuring things, and that's not their fault because they don't have coercive power. It's the government's fault. It's the way the government buys stuff from them. Cost plus kind of contracts and things like that are just designed to promote graft and corruption and delays. If you say to somebody, we want a new fighter plane, they say, great, that's going to be $500 billion. You say, okay. And if you run over, well, we're just going to keep paying you. So if it turns out being $800 billion, you're going to get what it costs, plus we're going to give you a percentage. That tells the person who's selling the airplanes, run up the cost, make it take as long as possible, and the more we delay and the more we go over budget, the more money we make. If, on the other hand, the United States says, I need a fifth-generation fighter aircraft, and they say, we will buy 500 billion of them. However, we're going to buy 500 billion of them, and that's it. Then you get back to where you were back in the 60s when you had 13, 15 aerospace companies, and Grumman's got a plane, and Northrop's got a plane, North American's got a plane, Lockheed's got a plane, Boeing's got a plane, Douglas has a plane. You know, all these companies are competing with each other, trying to figure out how can we get the most capability at the lowest cost because we want that money. Now it's like we already have the money. The more we delay, the more money we get. Take that out of the way. Get rid of cost plus contract buys, and you don't have much of a military-industrial complex anymore. You're kind of back to the kind of competition we had that got us from the Wright brothers to the SR-71 in, roughly 60 years. And then in the next 60 years, nothing. Slower. There we go. David Holy says, I walked into a lively discussion between two clerks at my local CVS. They were talking about how miserable rich people seem to be all the time. Gee, I wonder if that would have to do with somebody constantly vilifying them and trying to tax their money away. Anyway, one of them actually said, why would you want to be rich if you're going to be miserable all the time? I'd rather be poor. Yes, she really said that. I guess the question is, how do you debate someone with logic like that? I just muttered that I'd rather be miserable in a penthouse than a flop house, paid for my things and left. The more I think about this stuff, and all this stuff is new to me, I didn't come into this business fully equipped for all these arguments. I started reasoning and reading and learning and talking and hearing from people like you and arguing. And so all of my positions evolve. None of them have changed radically, but they evolve and get refined. And the more we talk about wealth and the more we talk about money, and the more the world has changed in the last 20 years, the more we get back to what I started off the show with, which is this glorification of poverty as a moral good, that poor people are morally advantageous and that rich people are fundamentally evil. This business, to directly answer your question, David, the idea that rich people are miserable is a myth that is generated to make poor people complacent and willing to tolerate their lot in life. They look at rich people and they see all these material benefits, and as long as they're being told all the time, and they are being told all the time, they're being told in movies, they're being told all the time that being rich is somehow bad and awful and miserable, and you lose your connection to reality and so on, then poverty becomes a little more bearable and becomes a little more tolerable and acceptable and manipulatable. But I've known people, and you're looking at one right now, who've been very poor, and I mean very poor, I don't like to get too much into this because I don't want to sound like I'm wallowing, because this idea that the fact that I was once poor somehow gives me moral stature that I wouldn't have if I would have been rich my whole life. The argument is the argument. The facts are the facts. The data is the data. It doesn't matter where I come from. But the fact of the matter is, I can connect to this because I was actually there. I was, when I was in college, we just didn't have money to eat. I was 6'1". I weighed 119 pounds. And I weighed 119 pounds for 8-9 years. I remember clearly when I got up to 135, and it was only because I had enough money to eat. I remember buying $50 worth of groceries at one time. That was a big event. Remember that very well. But it's not more fun to be poor. In fact, on some level, depending on your line of work, it's virtually, and I'm going to be very careful about how I say this, it is certainly possible, but it's harder to become a fully realized human being if you're in a state of absolute poverty. A lot would depend on what it is you're actually trying to do with your life and what your goals are. It's possible if you're, for example, if you're I don't mean a teacher, if you're an academic, if you're a scholar, and history, for example, Chaucer, let's say, is your passion in life, then you can become as fully realized as you want to be and really be quite a poor person. But generally speaking, if most of your time and effort is spent worrying about money, it's not a question of, hey man, I'm going skiing this weekend in Switzerland. I'm not talking about that. If you spend so much of your life worrying about money and your amount of resources are so tight that you no longer have the ability to set some of them aside in order to escape this resource trap downstream, then you're in a state of real psychological distress. And I can connect to this, like I said, very well. I remember, like I said, 2009, 10, somewhere in the 8 or 9, the first time I had consistently 4 figures in a bank account. Well, that meant that everything I was doing up until that point was hand to mouth. Hand to mouth. I couldn't build this office hand to mouth. I got my credit score today. My credit score when I applied for credit when I got back from Australia, my uncle pulled me out of here because I was failing so catastrophically. He took me to Australia for 3 months, and when I got back, I had $40 in my pocket, and that's all. I got a bike. A friend of mine, gave me a bike, and I lived in a friend's garage. I got a job. I got an advance on the job. I lived in a motel. I worked at editing job, and I worked another job as well. Eventually, I got a little used car, and eventually I got an apartment. But when I went looking for the apartment from the motel, and I'd been in that motel for about 5 weeks, just big enough to put the bike in. I had to leave my cats with my mom, and it was just horrible, just disgraceful. But I clearly remember going to apply at an apartment, and it's one of the first time this happened to me, and it certainly wasn't the last, and sitting there and filling out the application and having people say, I'm sorry, no, we can't let you in here. Really? Yeah, you might want to check this other apartment complex. It's for people with really low credit scores. I went to the other apartment complex, and I overheard this, and they said, you're going to think I'm making this up, but I'm not. And I think this would have been about 1998, I want to say. And I overheard them say, I got to make a call. This is at the second place. The first place just laughed me out of there. And I had the money to pay the rent, but they laughed me out of there. I went to the second place, and they said, yeah, I don't know, what do we do? Because this was low, this kind of place you went, we had no credit. I said, yeah, well, it's actually, I think it's below 300. And I didn't think it was possible. Something like, or below 350 or something. It was like below the bottom of the scale. The person didn't know what to do. I didn't know you could go below the bottom of the scale. I thought what the definition of a scale was, but nope. I got my credit score report 2 days ago, and I just cracked 700, which is how fortunate, huh? How fortunate I am that I have a 700 credit score, when most of my life my credit score was 500 or less. Well, there's nothing fortunate about it. The reason I got a 701 credit score now is because for the last 10 years of my life, and certainly the last 6 years of my life, I've been working like an animal. I just work like crazy. I don't turn anything down. If there's a speaking engagement, I'll take it. I just take it all. And that's just a choice. I just got tired of living that way. I just got tired of it. I just was tired of being embarrassed and tired of being ashamed and tired of being held back from the things I wanted to do. And when I say started working, it wasn't like all of this was, this groovy stuff. I was working as editor, and I was working in it's just, I had a skill set there, but it wasn't like gee, this is a dream job. And I was living in crummy apartments, horrible apartments. And I remember so clearly going down Lancashire Boulevard. I remember this like it was yesterday, because it feels like it was yesterday. Going on Lancashire Boulevard, and you'd find a couple places there that had retread tires. And I would, when my tires were showing, when they're showing the cord through there, I would go to one of these tire places, and you would get out of the car and you'd look around and you'd pick the ones that seemed to have the most tread. I think I got 4 tires for my Honda CRX, probably $40 for $60 for 4 tires, something like that. And so on some level, I'm only saying this to tell you that, look, I'm not naive enough to say that everybody can just do this, because I know I have a unique set of abilities, but I worked for this unique set of abilities. I mean, I really did. I really worked for them. And so hard work trumps big, bright intellect every day. Every day. I was the same guy, had the same brain, had the same, I almost said I had the same personality, but I had a much worse personality. And I was broke for 30 years. I mean, broke for 30 years. So what happened? Well, what happened was I just decided I just got tired of being broke, and it was time to start working and getting on with it and working harder than I had been. I used to play video games. I used to just do, just like bored all the time. So the idea of being bored now is beyond my comprehension. I can't comprehend having enough time to be bored anymore. And it's just a question of getting down to business and going to work. And all of the things that I had done, I'd managed to find a way to capitalize on. And so that's basically why I'm here. That's why I have this office. I have this office because I work very hard. And apparently this show provides some value to people. And through various intricate forms of webs, this turns into actual income for me. But I could have gone back to school. I could have improved my education. I could have done any number of things. But what I really did was I just decided to work harder. A lot harder. A lot harder. And sure enough, you see rewards from that. And there was a point I was going to make about this. What was it? Doggone it. It was really kind of cool too. I guess it had something to do with that, with the happiness. But now I have the ability to there are 2 things I will say about this. Obviously, standard of living increase is nice, but one thing I've learned, we're really getting a little off the rails here, but that's okay, because we're about done with the questions anyway. When you are really, really poor for a long time, I mean, broke poor, you develop, most people do, I certainly did, you develop a very, very bad, a number of bad habits. And one of them for me was that whenever you would find any excess money, you'd go and buy something because you got so little. You actually got to buy so little that once you had, like $300 or something, I'm going to get a new computer, this or what, and you kind of splurge spend. And I found, to my utter amazement, that about 2 years ago, I moved into my new apartment and I got the Camaro. And after I got the new apartment and the new car, I realized, to my absolute amazement, that I didn't need anything more than that right now. That doesn't mean it's my end apartment, and it doesn't mean it's my end car, but it does mean that I don't have to go buy things to have momentary periods of happiness. And I've been so much more responsible with my money because I wasn't using money as a drug in that sense. I wasn't binging on little bits of excess cash. The other day I was at the Apple store, and my iPhone 5 is a first model 5 crapped out, and they could fix the thing, and there was a line, and the 6 came out, and there's a lot to the 6 I would like, and I could afford the 6, and I would like, kind of nice cutting edge. But I thought, is there anything on this phone you have to have? No. Is there anything on this phone that's going to end up making you more money than it costs? No. Then fix the 5. I don't have to have it. I don't need it. It's not like I have to have it for emotional reasons. And this is the kind of thing I think that most people are talking about. And I remember where I was kind of going with this thing, with this the rich being unhappy thing, because while it is true that it is much more comfortable being rich than it is being poor, it is also true that some genuine kernel of this, the poor being miserable, does exist. And that kernel has got nothing to do with the wealth. It's got to do with the perception of what the wealth will do for you. And that's why, on some level, when you actually get to meet Hollywood people and actors and writers and producers and directors, some of the worst people in the world, And I ought to know because I was one of them. I really was one of them. Well, some of the most immoral, narcissistic, self-centered, unhappy, miserable, mean-spirited swine. And I was one of them. And I was fortunate that I was able to get my head in shape, and then the money happened. Because I think when you look at the people who have these horrible excesses, Alec Baldwin comes to mind first, is a great example. Here's Alec Baldwin, who's an extremely handsome guy. In the shadows, maybe the handsomest man I'd ever seen. I mean, he's a really strikingly good-looking guy, great actor, top of his profession. And it's true for a lot of these people. They've got fame, they've got all the sex they could possibly want, they've got money, because the sex comes with the fame and the money. And the reason that that is such a curse to them is because then they realize that everything that they thought would fix them doesn't. And then life is miserable. I get that sense about Bill Maher very much. I get that sense about Michael Moore very much. Never got that sense about Rush Limbaugh or Glenn Beck. But I get that sense about Bill Maher and Michael Moore. Bill Maher especially strikes me as a guy who does a lot of drugs, does a lot of hookers, does a lot of, things to fill that emptiness inside him. It's never going to get filled. And I think that's the one thing I will say about poor people being happy and rich people being miserable, is that poor people have to understand, if you're going to be happy and poor, you have to make it your own. You have to make it out of human connections. You have to make it out of the important things. You have to make it about your relationships with people. And to the degree that people sacrifice human relationships in order to chase wealth, they are in fact miserable people. And they're very empty people, and their lives have no meaning because they have no human connection. I remember where I was off the rails with this, and I'll just say this. The best part about suddenly, not suddenly, over 10 years, starting to make some money is twofold. First of all, this utterly surprised me. It knocked me on my butt, to be perfectly honest with you. But the first time I wrote a paycheck instead of took one was, just tears me up just thinking about it. It was a transcendental experience to sign somebody else's paycheck on the front. That is an amazing feeling. It's an amazing feeling. Absolutely, you feel like a Superman. You feel like a man, and that's part of it. And the other part of it is I find that while I don't have any desire to go splurge on myself or do anything really for myself, but the ability to help people you care about and be able to really help them, get them to take a breath. Because I've been in situations where I spent 10 years where I didn't know if I'd be able to make next month's rent. And when that anxiety gets so high that you can't breathe anymore, people have come in over the course of my life 3 or 4 or 5 times and rescued me and saved me from this. And to be able to do that for somebody else is a profoundly moving experience, and absolutely is the best thing about working hard and making money, is the ability to connect to that kind of anxiety about money, and without being asked, to go in there and help the people you care about. Just breathe, not buy them out of their trouble or anything, but just get them some resources so that they can breathe and have a moment's peace. So, but it's the peace. Peace. Hey, we're good. Thanks, buddy. Actually, we're okay today. We're fine. Thanks. Thank you. This guy's terrific. I just love this guy. The guy who does the janitorial work here is a sweet, hard-working, wonderful guy, and really terrific, great guy. A lot of personality. And so that's really it. It's easier to be rich than it is to be poor. There's no question about it. And I remember. And the final thing too is, used to be that rich people were evil, and because for almost all of human history, the people who were rich were dukes and barons and earls, and they were mostly 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 8th generation people who'd never had hardship, never been poor. To some degree, maybe they have to be good at war or whatever, but you go back to Robin Hood. You're talking about people stealing from the peasants, in a way that these landowners who owned the people, really, honestly. In cases like that, this is where the left is really so mired, is they've got this Robin Hood sense of justice in a world where Robin Hood's been gone for 500 years. There's not this world where you're locked into poverty for the rest of your life, and certain people have the ability to just take things from poor people because it's just nuts. It's just nuts. I will invite that janitor onto the show. Dave Big Booty. That's Big Booty. That's the third great suggestion from you tonight. That'd be fun. It'd be fun. Well, I'll talk to him about it and see what he has to say. Maybe we'll see if we can have him sit down and be a guest. His English isn't super great, but he'd have a lot of interesting things to say, and I certainly enjoy talking with him. I really do. I love it every time he comes in. I'm usually here, and we sit and chat and try to help him if I can. Anyway, so let's move on. We got 4 to go. Joshua Tiemann says, in this world, you can either be a predator or you can be prey. Why would conservatives choose to be predators? Why would you choose to be evil? Is it not nobler to die and save yourself from becoming the monster? It's not. And by the way, those are not mutually exclusive conditions. Joshua, as I'm sure you know, because you're asking the question sarcastically, the idea that if you're willing to defend your life with lethal force makes you a monster is crap. It means no. And so many of these people, this is again, it's the unearned moral superiority. It's the hypocrisy of it. You go to a cocktail party in the Hollywood Hills, and Steven Spielberg and all these other people are there, and you say, "What do you think about the rights to self-defense?" Apparently, Steven Spielberg's got like the largest gun collection in L.A. County. I've heard that from 2 different people. But no, being armed is terrible. Really, would you rather see an armed society, or would you rather, be raped or killed in an alleyway? Most liberals would tell you, or that's what they call themselves. Most progressives would tell you, I think it'd be better for the sake of the world if I were to give my life, just so long as we would reduce the gun violence by getting guns off the street. You'll hear this kind of thing all the time. You'll hear them talking about how evil our troops are and how we just misunderstand ISIS, and ISIS really has got a really good case, really, when you get right down to it. All this other stuff, you hear all from them all the time, until they're on their knees in an orange jumpsuit or actually on their knees in an alley with a gun to their head. And then all of a sudden, if you ask them, how would you feel now about the Marine Corps if they could come in and rescue you before this guy saws your head off? Or how do you feel now about private gun ownership if all of a sudden, before this man rapes you and strangles you to death, a conservative Christian, let's say, were to turn the corner and have in his back pocket a .38 caliber revolver and save you from this? How do you feel about it now? Now that it matters, now that it's not philosophical, now that we're down to brass tacks. I bet you there's not a single feminist, progressive, liberal, anybody who would be on their knees about to be executed or about to be raped who wouldn't all of a sudden say, if a conservative person came around the corner with their gun and tried to stop this and could stop me from being murdered or raped, I would tell them to go away because of my lofty principles. Every single one of them would come over to my point of view. And the inverse is not true. And this is why I live where I live philosophically, because it's consistent. I would want to be armed in both cases. And I can't imagine a world where I would change my philosophy based on circumstances. I really can't. I can't imagine. I really can't imagine it. If somebody pointed out to me, I'd be happy to change my mind, but I'm not aware of it. So, look, predator, you don't have to. This is a false dichotomy, I think, Joshua. I suspect you knew it. You can either be a predator or you can be prey. I'm neither. Predator means I'm preying on other people. I'm a criminal. I'm a murderer. I'm a rapist, a thief. I'm not those things, but I'm not prey either. So it's a false dichotomy, and it's a false choice. You can either think your life is worth defending to the degree where you're willing to take some anxiety, training, money, and so on to deploy, or you don't. You just prefer not to look at it. But like everything else, it's courage. It comes down to courage, moral courage. Do you have the moral courage to face the fact that this could happen to you? And if you do have that moral courage to face the reality that this could happen to you, do you then have the physical courage necessary to go out, purchase a firearm, learn how to use it, keep it on you, and rehearse it? Because everything I learned how to do in flying, I learned how to do on the drive home from my flight instruction. And I had 2 power failures in a single-engine airplane, and they were both non-events because I had had those power failures thousands of times. I've had thousands and thousands of power failures in airplanes. Only 2 of them in the real world, but thousands. Every time I fly, I have a power failure. Every time I take off, I have an engine failure. And I have an engine failure every time I take off at the worst possible time. And and that's anxiety generating. But strangely enough, the more of it you do, the less anxiety you generate. And as I can testify from the real world, if you do it often enough, there will come a point where you may actually have it in the real world, and you'll be amazed at how little anxiety actually generates when you have an actual engine failure, because you have had so many engine failures in your mind that this is just another one of those. And every single pilot out there, by the way, it's a good example, pilots. Every single pilot out there will tell you the same thing, professional pilots, I mean. They will tell you that a couple times a year they go to the simulators and they train on circumstances that they will never encounter in the real world. That the training that they endure and that the training that they have to pass and are expected to pass and have to pass and they're prepared to pass are so far beyond what they could run into in the real world that real world emergencies are actually kind of a letdown. They're almost anticlimactic compared to what they're trained for in the sims. And that's precisely how it should be. The military, somebody's going to put it up there for me in a second. The idea of training should be harder than anything you should actually expect to encounter. So that the worst case scenario in the real world is actually a relatively simple exercise compared to what you're used to. It's a question of growing your capabilities, and as you grow your capabilities, your confidence increases so that when you stress yourself with non-lethal consequences, that's training, the repeated stress and the repeated accumulation of skills goes into the bank so that when you have to run into it when there are lethal consequences, it's not only within your physical capabilities, it's also within your mental and psychological capabilities. That's what good training is. So I don't buy this predator and prey thing. I used to think about the classic dichotomy question is which would win, the irresistible force or the immovable object. I actually, when I was young and stupid, spent a fair amount of time thinking about that. And it wasn't until somebody helped me out of this, because I knew that there was no answer to this question. I was kind of in a loop on it. I just why am I having a hard time processing which one of these things would win? And it was somebody, might have been Glenn Reynolds for some strange reason, but somebody said, Bill, the existence of the irresistible force means that there is no immovable object. The existence of an immovable object means that there is no irresistible force. One excludes the other. It's a logical conundrum. It's an impossibility. It's a perpetual motion machine. That really helped me a lot. Yeah, okay, got it. You can't have the two in the same place, because if there is one, you cannot have the other one. They lock each other out. So there you go. Okay, Joshua Tiemens again. Societal problems such as murder are always horrible problems that we cannot reasonably ask anyone to put up with. You cannot ask us to bear it, therefore you have no right to stop us from building a much more powerful state with enough power and authority over the common man and his evil tendencies that would completely halt this intolerable crime. So the argument there from the part of progressives would be murder is bad, therefore, and murder is in fact so bad that being murdered on the street, crime, that we have to build an all-powerful state, all-seeing state, all-powerful state to prevent the crime of murder. You have no right to say that we don't. My life outweighs your philosophical arguments, and if that's what it takes to stop being murdered in the streets, then that's the price we have to pay for my survival. Except that when you look at what kills people, first is disease, second is socialism, and third is war. Now, I think you could pretty much make that case. You look at the total number of casualties in pre-industrial wars. They're not huge numbers compared to 50, 60 million people killed. I don't think there's been 60 million combat casualties prior to Mao starving 60 million, 50 million people. I don't think there are that many people killed in war, ever, in history, altogether. I bet you could make a pretty compelling case that it's disease number one, socialism number two, and war number three. So when you build a big state that's not responsible to anybody, it's another false choice. The big state produces hundreds of thousands of times more murders than it prevents. And secondly, it's not required, because there are other ways to defend yourself. And the big state never does defend you, by the way. I mean, the state suppresses crime, but it doesn't prevent crime. You can have the most powerful police force in the world, but police forces are not with you all the time. The only way to defend yourself is point defense. That's the way to think of it. I never really thought of it before. You can think of the police force as sort of a suppressive, sort of a series of sensors and arrays and, long-range missiles and stuff that occasionally work. But ultimately, when it comes down to the moment, it's point defense. Here comes the harpoon. There goes the phalanx. Who's going to win? Point defense is the only defense that you can really count on. That's where I'd put all of my eggs. It's good to keep the long-range defenses out there, and it's nice to have a police force because a police force suppresses crime, but policemen are not often dashing into the scene of the murder or the rape. You don't often hear stories, in fact, I think they barely exist, where somebody's being raped and a policeman shows up in the act in time to prevent the rape. That's almost never happens. You just have to be prepared to take that responsibility yourself. So it's another false question that they ask. That's why they win these arguments, because they're arguing with themselves. They're not arguing with us. The last two. Paul Sullivan says the Second Amendment obviously only applies to a well-regulated militia. Can't you read? I can read, Paul. The definition of a militia is a group of people that bring their own weapons. Can you read? So the question is regulation, really. And first of all, you can't read. So the first argument I'll make about the militia argument about the Second Amendment is a militia, the definition is not kind of a club. The definition of a militia is citizens that bring their own weapons. If they're issued weapons, it's not a militia. That's an army. So the definition of a militia is citizens that have their own weapons at home. That's the definition of a militia. So obviously the founders intended individual citizens to have their own weapons at home. Secondly, if you read the sentence, you can see that the sentence has a declarative clause and a sort of an ornamental clause, if you like. There are actual terms for this. I don't remember what they are. But basically, it doesn't say, the Second Amendment doesn't say, in order for the people to bear arms, they must be members of a well-regulated militia. That would be a clear declarative statement. That's not what it says. It says a well-regulated militia, being, I forget what the exact wording is, being essential to the right of the people to bear arms shall not be infringed. In other words, what it's saying is the militia is a nice byproduct of people having weapons. But it doesn't say you have to be a member of a militia to have the weapons, because if that's what they wanted to say, that's what they would have said. They would have said, in order for private citizens to have their own weapons, they must be members of a well-regulated militia. It doesn't say that at all. It says a well-regulated militia is one of the benefits of people bearing arms. It doesn't say that they have to be a member of it. It says well-regulated, as Dave Big Booty for call-out number 4 on the show says, well-regulated in 1789 meant well-equipped. And regulated means makes level, to make even. So it doesn't matter. And by the way, you can do the same thing with the First Amendment. In other words, if I had written the First Amendment in such a way to say, the ability to wish happy birthday to somebody on their birthday being a lovely part of society and part of the glue that holds society together, the right of the people to speak freely shall not be infringed. That doesn't mean that you only can speak freely by saying happy birthday. It just means that saying happy birthday is one of the many benefits of having freedom of speech. It's just a little ornamentation. I actually kind of wish that they hadn't put it there, because these people are idiots and who can't read. But it is to keep and bear arms. Keep them, own them. That's what a militia is. And again, just go back to the party hat thing. The ability to wish happy birthday to your children is being an important part of being a functioning adult. The right to free speech shall not be impinged. That does not mean that you only have the right to say happy birthday. It just means it's one of the benefits of having the freedom to say happy birthday. And if they'd wanted it to say, you shall have the right to say happy birthday without intrusion by the government, but the government can monitor everything else that you say and do, then that would have been clear too. But that's not what they do, so it's not what they do. Idiots. And the last question on 4-part, magnificent, gigantic, probably 10-hour fiesta of philosophy comes from our friend Max Wild. Max, good to see you. Why don't you people want women to choose what they can do with their own bodies? We kind of covered that earlier. I'm not going to go over it again. When you hear that argument, you say, well, we're not talking about what they can do with their own bodies. What they can do with their own bodies is entirely their business. No one's saying for an instant, that women can't do what they want to do with their own bodies. We're talking about the other bodies that are inside of their bodies. That's the issue. Those are not their bodies. And when you hear people say, it's my body, it's my choice, it's not your body. It's not. It's not your DNA. It's not your genetics. You didn't put it there. If you could put it there by yourself, you wouldn't need males, and there wouldn't be any males. There wouldn't be sexual reproduction. Everybody would just split off by budding like amoebas do, and in that case, then you could do whatever you damn well want to. But you didn't make it on your own. You knew how it was made. somebody is equally responsible for it. I know this is just absolute heresy in the era of the ascendancy of women, but that baby is half the man's. It's half his. He put half of it there. He's half responsible for it. It's true the woman is bearing it, bringing it into the world. That is a burden that women pay, and they get benefits in exchange for those burdens. That's the social contract between the sexes. They have an obligation and a burden to bear the children and raise them, and in exchange for that, they are given a wide variety of benefits from the males who don't have that burden. You can start dicking around with that and poking holes in it if you want to, but nevertheless, that's the deal. And if it turns out, I'm not going to go back into this thing, but this is one thought I've had with this modern feminist idea that the definition of a modern woman is somebody who's willing to abort their own children. And if you're not willing to abort your own children, then you're not really female. Let me just say this. When we talk about the benefits provided to women in exchange for bearing children, a lot of feminists will say things like, okay, so nobody gets my door when I get out of the car, or maybe he doesn't, get the chair for me when I go to a restaurant or whatever. I don't need that. Nobody helps me get my bag into the overhead compartment. I don't care. I can live without that. The small price to pay for my freedom to have as many abortions as I want. It's a little deeper than that. If you exclude the privileges that are provided to childbearing half of the human race by the non-childbearing half, then you start getting into things like it's men in the lifeboats first. First. What do you mean first? Well, ma'am, Miss Progressive Feminist, if the Titanic is going down and we destroy this relationship that we have, where we men are willing to say we will die voluntarily to preserve you, and the reason we're going to die to preserve you is because you preserve the species. This is why we're doing it. Women and children first into the lifeboats. I will give up my one and only life in exchange for protecting the women. You can mess with that contract, and you're doing your very best to do it. If that's the case, it won't be... See, this is the thing that they don't get. This is the thing that these feminists don't get, is that if the Titanic goes down and they get their way, it won't be women and children first. But it won't be women and men equally either. It won't be like, well, we'll just one by one go into the lifeboats. Because if this contract is destroyed and the Titanic goes down, every single person in those lifeboats will be male. Every single one of them will be male. Every one of them. Because they're stronger than the women. And if we destroy this entire contract that we have between the sexes, which is their intention, then it's not like they're going to get half the seats on the lifeboats. They're going to go from having all the seats on the lifeboats to having none of the seats on the lifeboats. Because if this goes away, then it will just be a question of who's stronger. Who is physically stronger? We know the answer to this. They may not want to admit it, but we know it's true. So that's your Titanic 2112, right? The boat strikes an iceberg. It's your body? Okay, knock yourself out. Fantastic. Help me aboard. Help yourself aboard. Wait a minute, what are you doing? I'm throwing you overboard. How dare you? What do you mean, how dare I? I can, can't I? I'm stronger than you, aren't I? Maybe I'll just punch you in the nose or punch you in the face, knock you unconscious, pitch you overboard. Now I'm in the lifeboat. You're in the water freezing to death. So think it through, ladies, because it's not as obvious or as superficial as you think. It's much deeper. It's much, 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 much deeper than that. Much deeper. And there are a lot of single moms out there who are working very hard and trying to do both those jobs. And I have more sympathy for them than anybody else in this society. I really do. I have more sympathy for single moms who have to go out in the world and deal with all the stress of work and everything, and then have to come home and raise a family by themselves. It's terribly, terribly difficult. It's true for single dads, too. There's just not as many of them. But when you start tampering with this, you are messing with the fundamental glue of civilization. Because if men are not giving up their seats to women in lifeboats when the ship is going down, then it's game over as far as everything that I think that life is worthwhile is about. Then it genuinely becomes the kind of living hell that feminists should fear more than anything. If you do away with this contract, you no longer have good men giving their lives to protect women from bad men. It's all just brute force. And these women will lose in every one of these battles. Not just physical brute force either; it's psychological brute force. We're not these guys wouldn't be using their fists. I mean, if you have the Titanic in year 2112 after this thing is done, they're the ones who are going to be armed with knives and guns and be perfectly willing to use them against these poor, innocent, defenseless people. They're going to shoot them in the head and pitch them into the ocean. That's where the world goes. That's where the world goes if you start messing around with this. I wouldn't do it. And as Glenn writes about all the time, women had a... Look, just so we're crystal clear, I've said it before earlier tonight, and I'll say it again. Anybody who doesn't think that women should have full legal protection, full exact same salary if they're doing the exact same job for the exact same hours, and absolute equality under the law, that person's a Philistine. They're subhuman. There's something wrong with them. They have serious psychological issues. Of course they should be treated as equals. But this kind of thing is a different sort of thing. It's not law. This is deeper than law. It's deeper than all that other stuff. And that's why so many feminists are so fantastically unhappy, and why so many conservative women seem to be happier, because there is possible to strike the best of both worlds arrangement, where men do things like get the door and get, and get out of the lifeboat and make way for you and the kids to get in the lifeboat, and still treat you like human beings. And you have full law and legal protections. You have full abilities to do whatever you want to in life, have your entire careers ahead of you, achieve whatever you want to. That world exists. It exists right now. But as always, the reason we're conservatives is because people want to go too far, right? You get to a point where everything's awesome, and then they just want to keep going. And then it gets less awesome. And that's where I get off the boat. That's where I stop. That's where I start conserving the awesomeness. And at 2 hours, 38 minutes and 54 seconds into episode 3, we are finished with the Tough Liberal Questions edition of the Stratosphere Lounge, the most epic piece of blathering nonsense and jaw-flapping I think I've ever experienced personally. We should be in much better shape office-wise next week than this week. We're moving very quickly. We're almost done. We won't have Stratosphere Lounge 2.0 up next week. We might the week after that. In any event, I think I'm about done for the night. It's time for me to relax a little bit and get back to work. But anyway, it's been an absolute pleasure. It has always been a pleasure, but this particular 4-episode show was really just a lot of thoughts, a lot of clarifying thoughts. And it's fun to get tough questions, because then you have to really think things through, and you have to kind of figure out, does this make sense? And I think the thing that's remarkable about our philosophy is it does make sense. It's actually pretty simple. It's pretty straightforward. And it's consistent, and it holds together, and it works. And that's why I like it. So I'll keep fighting for it, if you will. And I think we're probably about done for the night. So you be careful out there. Have a great night. Thanks for coming in on Friday. We'll get the last one uploaded, and we'll get this one uploaded, and we'll take it from there. And until then, have a great evening and a great weekend, and I'll see you next week. Okay? Bye-bye.